Hyul is the third son of the prestigious Shin family, a household that has long been recognized as the #1 magic family in all of Korea. Despite being born into such an influential lineage, he is considered the black sheep of the family because he cannot even perform basic magic and consistently ranks at the bottom of the academy. However, his life is destined to change when the creator of magic secretly chooses him as the vessel to inherit all of his magical powers. Although everyone around him, including his own parents and fellow students, treats him like a worthless loser, the real question is whether Hyul can prove himself worthy of the magic he got and eventually become the strongest mage in existence. But before that happens, the story begins a little earlier. 2 years before the present events, right before entering the prestigious Obelisk Academy of Magic, Hyul made a promise to his father. He vowed that he would achieve results worthy of carrying the Shin family name by graduating at the very top of the academy, becoming the greatest mage in the world, and one day leading the Shin family himself. His father encouraged him at the time, telling him that his innate talent far surpassed even that of his own brother and that nobody would be able to compete with him. He even said he looked forward to witnessing Hyul reach the very pinnacle of AI magic. However, things did not turn out the way anyone expected. In the present day, Hyul has become known as a complete loser who cannot even use basic magic properly. During class, the teacher announces that they will be having a practical examination, and the first one to appear in this exam is Baek-Sayuk. The teacher advises him to do as he usually does and don't get nervous. But upon hearing this, Baek-Sayuk mockingly tells everyone that there is no reason to be nervous after all the person who will finish last has already been decided. He openly insults Hyul, calling him useless trash who cannot even use basic AI magic and questioning how someone like him even managed to reach the second year. Despite hearing all the ridicule around him, Hyul remains calm and internally explains how magic works in the modern world. Although mages are still extremely rare and valuable, magic itself has evolved significantly thanks to artificial intelligence. Every modern mage now has AI chips implanted into their bodies, allowing them to cast spells effortlessly without needing long and complicated incantations. Unfortunately, Hyul is the only person in the entire world whose body is incompatible with this system, leaving him unable to benefit from the technology everyone else relies on. Once the practical exam officially begins, Baek effortlessly demonstrates his abilities. Using his fire magic, he quickly defeats the summoned monster well within the time limit and easily passes the test. Then Hyul's turn arrives, but things immediately go wrong. He spends far too much time trying to cast even a single spell, giving the monster an easy opportunity to overwhelm and defeat him. As a result, he fails the exam, causing the entire class to burst into laughter. Even so, Hyul does not seem completely discouraged. Instead, he quietly smiles to himself and thinks positively about the situation. Although he failed the examination, he notices that his incantation speed has improved considerably compared to before. It may not be enough to satisfy others, but to him, even small progress still matters. Later that day, while sitting alone in his room, Hyul begins reflecting on everything that happened after he was declared incompatible with AI magic. The moment that diagnosis was made, his father abandoned all expectations he once had for him. He even sent medicine designed to destroy the mana circle inside Hyul's heart, so he would completely give up on becoming a mage and instead focus on studying magic theory like an ordinary person. However, Hyul never intended to abandon his dream. That is precisely why he chose a completely different path. Since he could not use modern AI magic, he decided to dedicate himself to traditional magic instead, even though it has become outdated in today's world. The problem, however, is that old magic can only be learned through physical books. Looking around at the piles of books surrounding him, he sighs in frustration and jokes that life would be much easier if these ancient textbooks at least existed as ebooks because he is rapidly running out of space. At that moment, something catches his attention. In the corner of the room sits a mysterious magic book that he does not remember ever buying. The book looks extremely old, but at the same time, it appears expensive and unusually elegant. Curious, Hyul picks it up and opens it to see what is inside. As he flips through the pages, he notices handwriting covering them, but it is so messy that he can barely understand anything. Even so, a few words stand out to him, particularly the name Rebel Baiteno. The moment he reads it, memories immediately return because he used to read numerous biographies about him when he was younger. Rebel Baiteno was known as humanity's first Grand Mage, the first emperor of the Magus Empire of Baiteno, and the creator of all magic itself. Suddenly, without any warning, the book begins emitting a bright light. The intensity catches Hyul completely off guard, causing him to immediately drop it as he stares in confusion and wonders what exactly is happening. At that moment, the mysterious book suddenly begins speaking. A voice echoes out and tells Hyul, "To the one who shares my constitution and can hear my voice, listen carefully. I, Ray Bell Baiteno, leave this book to you." Hyul is instantly stunned because the voice somehow feels strangely familiar to him. He stares at the book in disbelief, unable to understand what is happening right in front of him. The following day, Hyul is quietly eating lunch by himself at the academy cafeteria near a window. Soon Ji Sun-chan, his only real friend, approaches him and jokingly asks if he is eating alone once again. Hyul internally explains that despite Sun-chan's somewhat goofy appearance, he is actually an incredibly talented student who ranks within the top 10 of the academy. At only 18 years old, he has already reached the level of a third circle magician. Sun-chan sits beside him and tells him that if anyone is bullying him again, all he has to do is say the word and he will take care of it himself. Hyul tells him that things are fine, but then brings up the strange book he discovered the previous night. He explains that it is a book related to Ray Bell Baiteno, but he suspects that somebody at school may have tampered with it because everything after the third page is completely blank. He continues explaining that when he opened the book, it suddenly emitted a bright light and a mysterious voice spoke to him. According to the voice, Ray Bell Baiteno was leaving all of his magic behind for a successor. The voice also mentioned that anyone who did not share the same constitution as Baiteno would not even be capable of opening the book in the first place. Sun-chan immediately becomes interested after hearing that story and asks if he can try opening the book himself. However, Hyul ignores that request for a moment and reveals something even more shocking. He says that the final page states that before inheriting Baiteno's magic, he first needs to create a mana circle inside his brain instead of the heart. That revelation catches Sun-chan completely off guard. He quickly says that this is not something to joke about because creating a mana circle inside the brain is practically a death sentence. Mana itself is extremely dangerous when it reaches the brain, so attempting something like that could easily kill a person. Even so, his curiosity gets the better of him, and he asks Hyul to let him inspect the book. Later that night, inside Hyul's dormitory room, Sun-chan tries everything he can think of to open it. He uses physical strength and even attempts to force it open with magic, but nothing works. Eventually, he gives up and guesses that the book may be protected by some kind of magical seal. Since there is nothing else he can do, he tells Hyul goodnight before leaving the room. The moment Sun-chan walks out, Hyul casually opens the book without any difficulty at all. Then something strange happens. The pages that were previously blank suddenly become filled with writing. At the same time, Baiteno's voice appears once again and starts explaining something important to him. Baiteno starts talking, stating that to my successor, if my guess is right, Hyul is probably using a mana circle located in his heart to cast magic. While that method may be perfectly normal for ordinary people, he explains that it is not the correct approach for either himself or Hyul. Hearing that only makes Hyul even more confused than before. Baiteno then tells him that if he truly accepts his will and is prepared to become his disciple, there is something he must do first. He has to destroy the mana circle inside his heart and replace it by creating a new mana circle within his brain. Only after accomplishing that will he be able to open the book again and continue receiving his teachings. Hyul immediately dismisses the idea and calls it a terrible joke. After all, mana is the source of every type of magic, but it is also highly toxic to the human brain. If mana reaches the brain directly, a person's mind can collapse, which may ultimately result in brain death. Knowing all of this, Hyul simply wraps himself inside his blanket and wonders who in their right mind would ever attempt something so insane. The next day, Hyul decides to visit one of his instructors and asks him to examine the mysterious book. He requests that the teacher try opening it and check whether it has been sealed using a magical spell. To avoid raising suspicion, he lies and says that strange rumors about the book have been spreading among students lately, so he wanted an expert opinion. His teacher tells him that focusing on meaningless rumors is not good for his studies, but he agrees to inspect it anyway since Hyul personally asked him. He first attempts to open the book himself, but fails. Then he uses magic to scan it and determine whether a spell has been placed on it. Surprisingly, he finds absolutely no traces of magic and simply tells Hyul to forget about the rumors and concentrate on his education instead. However, this outcome is exactly what Hyul was secretly hoping for. If even Sunchan, who possesses tremendous magical power and an academy instructor, cannot open the book, then perhaps there is a chance that everything it says is actually true. For the first time, he seriously begins considering the possibility that Raybel Baitano's book is real. That night, after spending a long time thinking about it, Hyul finally takes out the medicine his father previously sent him. The purpose of the medicine was to destroy the mana circle inside his heart, so he could abandon his dream of becoming a mage. But Hyul sees it differently. He tells himself that he is not afraid, and that he has no intention of giving up on magic. He knows that his life has already reached a dead end anyway. Because of that, he decides to gamble everything on this one opportunity. Holding the medicine in his hand, he accepts the possibility that he could die today, but even then, he chooses to take the risk and give Raybel Baitano's mysterious book a chance. As soon as Hyul takes the medicine, he suddenly feels an intense pain spreading through his chest. He immediately realizes that the mana circle connected to his heart is beginning to break apart. However, the moment he starts circulating mana through his brain instead, the unbearable pain gradually disappears. Shortly afterward, he loses consciousness entirely. While trapped in a dreamlike state, he begins to wonder if he has already died and questions whether this strange sensation is what death actually feels like. At that moment, countless whispers start echoing around him. Hyul soon realizes that these voices belong to mana itself. He can somehow sense that light and darkness, along with the sky and the earth, are all peacefully coexisting through mana. The voices continue growing louder as if they are singing, laughing, and celebrating his arrival. Rather than feeling afraid, it almost seems as though they are welcoming and blessing him. The next morning, Hyul suddenly wakes up and is immediately surprised that he is still alive. As he looks around, he notices that the mysterious book has already opened itself. The previously blank pages are now filled with writing, and the voice inside the book has become much clearer than before. Baitano then congratulates him for successfully taking the very first step and reveals that the name of the book he is holding is Idrid. Baitano continues speaking and tells Hyul that his true legend will begin through this book from now onward. He officially entrusts all of his magic to him and even refers to him as his disciple. Hearing those words causes Hyul to become overwhelmed with emotion. Tears begin flowing down his face because, for the first time in his life, he feels as though he has finally escaped the label of being a useless failure. A few days later, Hyul is sitting inside the classroom with a huge smile on his face because another new entry has appeared inside Idred. He quietly thinks to himself that he never imagined learning magic could actually be this enjoyable. He then explains that the book contains an enormous amount of knowledge and that he has learned something very important about mana itself. According to Idred, mana possesses a will of its own. For ordinary people, when mana enters the brain, the will of the brain and the will of mana collide against each other, ultimately destroying the brain. That is exactly why mana is considered toxic when it reaches that area. However, Hyul's body is different because the will of his brain naturally suppresses the will of mana instead of being overwhelmed by it. That unique trait also explains why he was naturally resistant to AI chips from the very beginning. Since AI magic directly interferes with brain functions, his body automatically rejected it. Just then, their teacher enters and announces a major change regarding the second-year midterm evaluations. Starting this year, any student who fails to meet the academy's standards and shows extremely low magical aptitude will be expelled from the school. While making the announcement, the teacher deliberately stares at Hyul in a threatening manner and reveals that this policy was personally proposed by the head of the Shin family. Immediately, the entire classroom erupts into silent laughter. His classmates mock him, saying that it is finally time to get rid of defective students once and for all. Even the teacher joins in and sarcastically comments that there appears to be a certain borderline student sitting in his class. Later that evening, Hyul heads into the city to find a training center where he can practice his newly acquired abilities. He intentionally avoids training at the academy because he wants to surprise everyone during the midterm evaluation. Once he arrives, he is immediately shocked after seeing that the facility costs 200,000 won per hour. Even though he comes from a wealthy family, the price still feels burdensome because his parents rarely give him money anymore due to their disappointment in him. After entering the building, he rents a room for an hour. While processing the request, One of the employees recognizes him as the third son of the Shin family, who is publicly labeled as incompatible with AI magic. The employee quietly comments that Hyul truly has terrible luck before directing him toward room 14. Upon entering the room, Hyul immediately activates the training simulator. Within moments, multiple dark aura wolves begin appearing around him. He knows these monsters may be low-ranking creatures, but fighting 10 of them at the same time is still a difficult task. He also remembers that the average academy completion time for this challenge is 12 minutes and 33 seconds, meaning he needs to surpass that if he wants to impress everyone during the midterm evaluation. Despite the challenge ahead, Hyul is overflowing with confidence because he has been practicing every day using the teachings recorded inside iDread. He believes this is the perfect opportunity to measure his current growth. As the wolves begin attacking, Hyul activates his newly created mana circle, known as the Infinity Circle. Instantly, he uses water magic to block their attacks with incredible ease. He stares in amazement at his own abilities because he can hardly believe this power belongs to him. Hyul then explains that while ordinary mages circulate mana only through the heart in order to use AI magic, he can now circulate mana throughout his entire body by utilizing his brain instead. Thanks to the Infinity Circle, all of his previously suppressed magical power has finally been released. As he begins combining his attacks with fire magic, Baiteno suddenly speaks up. He tells Hyul not to become overly impressed by something at this level because he still has a very long journey ahead of him. According to Baiteno, the Infinity Circle is merely the basic foundation of Baiteno-style magic. He then touches Hyul's head and explains that mastering this system is all about controlling magic through the images formed inside his mind. He also reveals that this is only the first book of Baiteno's magical teachings. Later, after finishing his training session, Hyul leaves the facility while the employee politely thanks him and asks him to visit again in the future. However, when the employee enters room 14 to clean up afterward, he notices the ranking board and is immediately left speechless. Hyul managed to complete the wolf challenge in just 6 minutes and 37 seconds. The employee cannot believe what he is seeing because someone labeled as incompatible with AI magic should never be capable of producing a result like that. In fact, the record is good enough to compete on an international level. Unable to accept it, he simply kicks the monitor in frustration and blames the machine itself, convincing himself that the equipment must be broken again. After some time, Hyul finds himself struggling to create the first magic circle, also called as Sime, described inside iDread. The records written in the book is completely different from every type of magic he has studied throughout his life. One of the teachings says that mana is both his arms and his legs, and that his heart and mind should move according to his own will. However, the words are so vague that he cannot fully understand their meaning. It feels as though the answer is right in front of him, hidden behind a transparent curtain that he can almost reach, but never quite grasp. In the world of magic, this phenomenon is known as the Wall of Enlightenment. Every magician eventually encounters it when they reach the limits of their current abilities. Knowing that forcing an answer will not help him, Hyul decides to simplify his approach for the time being. Instead of trying to master everything at once, he focuses entirely on circulating mana throughout his whole body exactly as the book instructs him to do. But he wonders if this will really be enough for the exam. The next morning, Hyul suddenly realizes something surprising. By the time he regains awareness of his surroundings, he's been maintaining mana circulation for 10 straight hours. Normally, a task that demanding would have exhausted him to the point of collapsing, but strangely, he does not feel drained at all. As he heads toward class, Sun-chan greets him as usual and immediately notices his tired appearance, asking if something is wrong with him again. Hyul tells him that he is fine, but internally he admits that constantly monitoring the flow of mana is much harder than he expected. Even so, he knows he has no choice because he wants to become accustomed to his new mana circle as quickly as possible. He remembers that when he was only 12 years old, he had already reached the second circle and was praised as a prodigy. During those days, his father placed enormous expectations on his future. Now, however, things are completely different. Despite all those early accomplishments, he can currently form only a first circle spell using the mana circle inside his brain. While thinking about this, he remembers something his father used to tell him when he was younger. According to him, breaking through the wall of enlightenment was essential for advancing in magic, and perfection was something every magician needed to pursue. But suddenly, Hyul reaches a completely different conclusion. He realizes that perfection itself may simply be another form of restraint, and perhaps nothing more than an illusion created by human arrogance. At that moment, the meaning behind Edred's words finally becomes clear to him. He now understands that mana truly is an extension of his own body, and that both his heart and mind should move freely according to his will. He comes to the realization that being imperfect is not necessarily a weakness. Rather than obsessing over perfection, magicians should allow their imagination to roam freely without being bound by rules or standards created by others. The moment he embraces that idea, another breakthrough occurs. He can suddenly feel that instant spell casting does not require incantations at all. Modern AI magic depends on shortened incantations and predefined formulas to activate spells consistently. However, Baiteno's teachings revolve around releasing those restrictions altogether. By freeing his thoughts, magic itself can take on any shape he imagines and completely ignore the rigid algorithms used in modern systems. Hyul becomes overwhelmed with excitement because even though he is still only a first-circle magician, he is now capable of performing something that should have been impossible. Although using these methods puts a huge strain on his body, he cannot help but feel happy. For the first time in a long while, he feels that he is truly progressing and slowly breaking through the wall that had trapped him for so many years. Every step forward makes him believe that he can finally reach heights he once thought were unattainable. The following day, while he is sitting in class, his teacher suddenly informs him that someone has come to see him and tells him to follow along. Hyul is then brought to a reception room where he discovers that the visitor is actually his father. After the teacher leaves, the two sit down together and his father immediately comments that he can see Hyul is still attending school, meaning he obviously has not taken the medicine that was sent to him. Hyul admits that he did not take it as intended, but he also explains that he has recently begun making progress with his magic. His father immediately dismisses the claim and questions why he is still stubbornly pursuing such a hopeless dream. He reminds Hyul that he has already wasted an entire year and says it is time for him to accept reality. His father goes on to explain that no matter how hard he works or what achievements he may gain in the future, he will never become a proper magician if he continues rejecting AI magic. However, he also says that Hyul possesses another talent. If he abandons these unrealistic ambitions and properly studies magic theory instead, even someone like him could still have a meaningful future. Hyul refuses without hesitation. He tells his father that he has no intention of giving up on magic because he does not want to live an ordinary life or spend the rest of his days relying on his family's reputation. With determination in his eyes, he declares that his true goal is to one day become a grand magician who will lead this year and also to become the next head of the Shin family. His father looks at him with disgust and says that dreams alone are not enough to achieve something so significant. But Hyul simply smirks in response and confidently says that he will prove himself. He then makes a bold proposal, declaring that he will place within the top 10 during the upcoming midterm evaluation. He even raises the stakes by offering a deal. If he fails, he will leave the academy and dedicate himself entirely to studying magic theory as his father has always wanted. But if he succeeds, his father must finally acknowledge his talent as a magician and fully support his magical studies from that point onward. His father accepts the challenge before leaving, hoping that the progress Hyul mentioned earlier will not end up being meaningless. A few days later, their teacher gathers the entire class and announces the format for this year's evaluation exam. Unlike previous years, students will not be tested through monster extermination. Instead, the exam will be held as a single elimination tournament, meaning everyone will participate in direct duels against one another. The event will last for 3 days and begin from the round of 16. To make matters even more significant, representatives from various businesses and members of the Magic Tower will be attending as spectators. Hearing this news excites many students, especially Bayek and the others, who immediately think this is their chance to finally force Hyul out of the academy. Meanwhile, Hyul feels the exact opposite. Rather than being nervous, he becomes excited because he finally has an opportunity to show everyone the results of all his hard work. During a break between classes, Hyul notices that the entire campus is buzzing with excitement. Everyone is talking about the upcoming midterm evaluation because this year's event is expected to attract enormous attention. One of the main reasons is the presence of the Magic Tower, which will be attending the tournament. Since media coverage will also increase because of them, students are even more eager than usual. The Magic Tower is an organization made up of 12 elite magicians from around the world and possesses influence and power comparable to that of an entire nation. Because of its prestige, almost every academy student dreams of becoming a member someday. While the excitement continues around him, Baek Sayuk suddenly approaches and calls out to him in his usual insulting manner. Referring to Hyul as a defect once again, he mockingly asks how he is feeling. After all, fate has arranged for the two of them to face each other in the very first match of the midterm evaluation. Baek laughs and confidently says that Hyul is completely doomed, adding that he will finally get his revenge for what happened 5 years ago. Hearing that immediately brings back old memories for Hyul. 5 years earlier, Baek had suffered a humiliating defeat against him. However, once Baek discovered that Hyul was incompatible with AI magic, he began relentlessly harassing him whenever he had the chance. Ever since then, he had been waiting for an opportunity to restore his pride and settle the score once and for all. Baek continues provoking him by reminding him about the Academy's new rules. Any student who performs below the required standards during the midterm evaluation will be expelled from school. He proudly declares that he will beat Hyul so badly that he will have no choice but to leave the Academy in disgrace. The students around them also laugh and imagine him returning home in tears after his inevitable defeat. However, Hyul views the situation very differently. Instead of feeling nervous, he realizes that this is the perfect opportunity he has been waiting for. Not only can he reveal his newly acquired abilities, but he also gets to do it against the person who has bullied him for years. With a confident smile on his face, he fires back and says that perhaps Baek is the one who should be worried about that outcome instead. Baek bursts into laughter and calls him crazy for failing to understand his own situation. But Hyul immediately reminds him about their encounter 5 years ago. He points out that Baek was just as confident back then, yet he still ended up losing miserably. Then he sarcastically asks why he has failed to improve at all despite all these years passing by. Not stopping there, Hyul pours even more fuel onto the fire by mocking him directly. He asks whether Baek has remained obsessed with his old defeat all this time and even gives him the nickname Wimp Wizard Baek Sayuk. Those words instantly strike a nerve. Furious, Baek grabs Hyul by the collar, but Hyul calmly removes his hand without showing any fear. As he straightens his clothes, Hyul delivers another insult. He says that since Baek has been living at the bottom for so long, he probably would not understand something important. A person can only experience a fall if they were once standing at the top. Then, with complete confidence, he proudly declares that a genius will always remain a genius, clearly referring to himself, and promises that Baek will soon remember exactly why. After saying his piece, Hyul simply walks away. Meanwhile, Baek is left standing there completely furious. Grinding his teeth in anger, he vows that he will utterly destroy Hyul during the examination and burn away every ounce of his confidence. The following day, Hyul comes across an online news article about himself. The headline boldly reads, "The Magnificent Return of a Genius. Can the fallen prodigy of the Shin family rise again against all odds?" Instead of being surprised, Hyul laughs because everything is unfolding exactly as he planned. He knew Baek's family would eventually hire reporters to generate publicity, and he deliberately provoked him to make it happen. Just as expected, Baek fell directly into the trap. Knowing his personality, Hyul was certain he would react this way. Shortly afterward, his father calls him after seeing the article online. He immediately asks whether Hyul was responsible for arranging everything, and Hyul honestly admits that he was. He even explains that provoking Baek was a calculated move designed to attract public attention. His father lets out a sigh and says that when he accepted Hyul's earlier proposal, it was never because he trusted him. He only agreed because there was nothing for the Shin family to lose. However, this article has the potential to bring unnecessary shame upon the family, making his actions reckless and irresponsible. Hyul, however, calmly explains that most people already believe he was removed from the Shin family anyway. Even if he ends up embarrassing himself publicly, the impact on the family should remain relatively small. His father immediately disagrees and tells him that even a small impact is still an impact. No matter where he goes, the Shin family name will always follow him. Hyul says that he already understands that reality. Even so, he believes the potential rewards outweigh the risks. Curious about his confidence, his father asks what benefits the family could possibly gain if he succeeds. Hyul proudly answers that they would gain him, the world's greatest magician and the strongest head the Shin family has ever produced. Seeing how serious he is, his father reluctantly accepts his reasoning. However, he also gives him a final warning. If all this confidence ends up bringing disgrace to the family, then Hyul must be prepared to face the consequences afterward. Finally, the day of the midterm evaluation arrives. As Hyul enters the stadium, Bayek immediately approaches him once again and mockingly asks if he enjoyed the article that was published. He says he cannot stop imagining how ridiculous Hyul will look after losing without even managing to cast a single spell. Instead of getting upset, Hyul simply thanks him. He says that Beck played directly into his plans and then confidently promises that he will end the match quickly. To make things even worse for Beck, he boldly declares that he intends to defeat him using nothing more than a single first circle spell. Hyul's words immediately make Bayek furious, causing his blood to boil with anger. However, before either of them can continue arguing, the referee blows the whistle, officially signaling the start of the match. Without wasting any time, Bake launches his signature attack, a third circle explosion spell intending to finish the battle with a single strike. The explosion engulfs the battlefield, and the audience instantly erupts with cheers, already convinced that Bayek has secured an easy victory. Bayek himself smirks confidently and says that this is exactly what Hyul deserves for acting so arrogantly. However, everyone's excitement quickly turns into shock. As the smoke begins to clear, Hyul calmly walks out of the explosion completely unharmed without even a scratch on his body. The entire stadium falls silent for a moment, while Bayek stares at him in disbelief. Refusing to accept what he just witnessed, Bayek immediately launches the same attack again, this time multiplying its power by casting it 3 times in succession. Yet, Hyul effortlessly neutralizes every single explosion using nothing more than first circle water magic, leaving everyone stunned. Beck can hardly believe his eyes. His specialty, a powerful third circle spell, has just been stopped by an ordinary first circle spell. At the same time, inside the VIP room, Kim Kangjin, the master of the Blue Tower and an 8th circle mage, is equally surprised by what he is seeing. He comments that something about Hyul's magic is extremely unusual because even if the spell itself is only first circle magic, instant casting at that level should be impossible. His assistant then asks why he rearranged his entire schedule at the Blue Tower just to watch a student competition. Instead of answering directly, Kim asks whether she knows anything about Hyul's magic because what he is witnessing is unlike anything he expected. She replies that she knows nothing about it. Kim then explains that he originally came because he saw an article discussing the return of a fallen prodigy, but now he is genuinely glad he decided to attend since he is witnessing something truly strange. His assistant points out that if the public discovers that the leader of the Blue Tower personally attended a students' tournament, it would create a massive uproar. Kim casually replies that he is already aware of that, which is precisely why he is observing the event from a private VIP room instead. At that very moment, Hyul's father also enters the room and Kim immediately welcomes him. Back on the battlefield, Bayek is struggling to process everything happening before his eyes. Not only did Hyul counter his attacks with weaker magic, but his casting speed has also become unbelievably fast. Seeing the confusion on Bayek's face, Hyul sarcastically asks whether he is really that curious about his casting speed. Those words only irritate Bayek even further, and he angrily tells Hyul to shut up before launching another barrage of explosion spells. However, his attacks once again fail to accomplish anything. Hyul immediately retaliates by creating a wind spear and sending it straight toward him. Beck manages to dodge at the last second, but he is left dumbfounded because he never even saw Hyul cast the spell in the first place. Frustration begins building inside him as he desperately tries to think of a way to overcome Hyul. Trying to regain his confidence, Beck arrogantly asks if Hyul truly believes he can win using only first circle magic. Hyul confidently answers that he can and immediately launches another wind spear. This time Beck blocks it with his magic barrier. Seeing that Hyul's attacks have not seriously injured him yet, Beck proudly begins insulting him again, saying that he should not get carried away simply because his casting speed improved a little. But before he can even finish his sentence, another wind spear suddenly appears and grazes his arm. Bayek immediately freezes in confusion because he cannot understand when Hyul even cast a second spell behind him. The unexpected attack surprises everyone watching the battle, including Kim Kangjin himself. Even an 8th circle mage like him is left wondering how Hyul managed to pull it off because the speed at which he cast it should have been impossible. Hyul mockingly asks Baek whether he still does not understand what is happening. With a smug expression, he even offers to show him once again. Immediately afterward, he casts multiple wind spears and reshapes them into the form of a bird before sending them toward his opponent. The sight alone terrifies Baek, who cannot believe what he is seeing. In complete disbelief, he questions whether that is even a wind spear anymore, because a normal wind spear should never possess a double-shot property. Hyul calmly agrees with him and says that he is absolutely right, but that does not stop him from doing it anyway. Then he boldly challenges Baek to try blocking the attack this time. Without hesitation, Baek quickly activates his magic barrier, believing he will be safe because the attack is still only a first circle spell. However, just when he thinks he has successfully defended himself, one of the wind spears suddenly strikes him from behind. Groaning in pain, Baek cannot comprehend what just happened. He wonders how one of the attacks managed to approach him from a curved trajectory, because that should have been impossible. Realizing that staying within Hyul's range is extremely dangerous, he immediately retreats and creates as much distance as possible. He reasons that magic should have limitations in both range and power, so if he moves far enough away, Hyul's unpredictable attacks should no longer be able to reach him. Hyul notices his decision and even compliments him for it. However, he immediately reveals another surprise. This time he combines all 4 wind spears into a single attack, creating a much larger spear with greater attack power and a significantly longer range. Without giving Baek any time to react, Hyul instantly launches the newly formed spell toward him. Baek is completely dumbfounded at this point. Nothing he is witnessing follows the rules of AI magic anymore. At the same time, inside the VIP room, Kim Kangjin is equally amazed by what he is seeing. He comments that not only can Hyul cast spells instantly, but he is also capable of changing their trajectories and merging them together in mid-air according to his own will. Kim is genuinely shocked because he has never seen magic being used this way before. Meanwhile, Hyul's father, Shin In-hyuk, the head of the prestigious Shin family and an 8th circle magician himself, remains expressionless and pretends not to be impressed. Kim's assistant then explains why Hyul's abilities are so unusual. She says that his magic completely ignores the established rules of open-source magic. Open-source magic is a system used around the world that records and shares information about every spell, including its attack power, range, and limitations. For example, a spell like Windcutter has a maximum range of 38 meters and can only alter its trajectory once. Since those limitations are universally accepted, the way Hyul is using his magic goes far beyond those boundaries. In simple terms, open-source magic only functions within its predefined effects. That is also why modern mage battles resemble strategic mind games rather than straightforward fights. Since everyone knows the capabilities and limitations of each spell, victory usually depends on predicting an opponent's next move and reacting accordingly. However, Hyul's magic completely breaks those expectations, making him impossible to read. Back in the arena, Baek is now on the ground, unable to believe that he is struggling against first circle spells. Hyul slowly approaches him and points out that he has been underestimating first circle magic far too much. He explains that exhausting oneself by repeatedly using powerful third circle spells is meaningless if they cannot be used properly. Sometimes all it takes to kill someone is something as simple as a single pen. Hyul then casts first circle water magic and says that the same principle applies to magic as well. A massive and complicated spell is not always necessary to defeat an opponent. To demonstrate his point, he begins drowning Baek with water magic. As Baek desperately gasps for air, Hyul reminds him that the academy uniforms are protected by safety barrier spells, yet even those protections are not helping him right now. Through this, Hyul successfully proves that neither weak spells nor weak opponents should ever be underestimated. Shortly afterward, the instructor officially ends the match and announces Hyul as the winner. Hearing those words fills Hyul with a sense of nostalgia because it truly feels like he has finally returned as a mage once again. At the same time, Kim Kangjin becomes even more excited after witnessing the entire battle. He says that the prodigy has finally returned and that he is eager to learn more about him. As Hyul leaves the arena, Sun-chan immediately rushes over to congratulate him. He excitedly tells him that his performance was incredible and that it is hard to believe he is the same person everyone used to call a loser. Unable to contain his curiosity, Sun-chan hugs him and asks what kind of secret training he has been doing behind the scenes because his magic has become unbelievable. Hyul then asks whether he truly wants to know. Sun-chan eagerly leans closer and says, "Of course," but with a mischievous smile on his face, Hyul simply replies that it is a secret. After the match, Ji excitedly hugs Hyul and immediately shows him an interview clip that has already gone viral online. Since he had been curious about Hyul's magic all this time, he figures this is the perfect opportunity to learn more. In the interview, several reporters surround Hyul and begin asking questions about the instant casting magic he demonstrated earlier. They specifically ask how he managed to alter the trajectory of his wind spears and even combine them together when such a feat is considered impossible according to modern magical principles. Hyul does not want to reveal his secret so soon, but fortunately for him, someone suddenly steps in to help. To everyone's surprise, Kim Kangjin, the Lord of the Blue Tower, appears before the reporters and offers to answer the questions on Hyul's behalf. Both Hyul and the reporters are shocked to see someone of his status personally attending the event. Kim then tells Hyul that he watched the entire match with great interest before turning his attention toward the reporters. Kim explains that he believes Hyul used a fourth circle spell known as Memorize. According to him, this spell allows a magician to prepare spells beforehand and cast them instantly whenever necessary. The reporters become even more curious and ask why such an incredible spell is not commonly used everywhere. Kim then explains that Memorize has a major drawback because it can only store spells that are 3 circles lower than the caster's current level. Hearing that immediately creates another wave of excitement among the reporters. They quickly conclude that Hyul must already possess the abilities of a fourth circle mage at such a young age. Hyul remains awkwardly silent because he does not want to lie, but before he has to answer, Kim confidently confirms it for everyone. The reporters immediately begin taking photos, realizing that this is a huge story because reaching the fourth circle at his age is comparable to the achievements of future Tower Lords, and since the Blue Tower Lord has confirmed it, there is no doubt that Hyul has reached fourth circle. Later on, Ji and Hyul watch the interview together. Ji directly asks him whether everything Kim said is actually true, but before Hyul could answer, Ji asks another question saying that he is still confused about one thing. He asks how Hyul managed to explain the way he ignored the rules of open source magic. Hyul simply tells him to continue watching because the answer will appear later in the interview. As they continue watching, the reporters eventually ask Kim about that exact topic. Surprisingly, even Kim admits that he cannot fully explain it himself. Seeing the opportunity, Hyul steps forward and gives his own explanation. He says that bypassing the rules of open source magic is actually very simple because he merely modified the spell formulas themselves. That answer instantly surprises Kim because such a thing should be nearly impossible, because modifying a spell formula is like trying to install flight functions onto a normal car. In theory, it sounds absurd and incredibly difficult to achieve. At that moment, Kim cannot help but wonder how extraordinary Hyul's future could have been if he had not been born incompatible with AI magic. Then Hyul makes another shocking announcement to everyone watching. He declares that from now on, he will refer to all of these modified spells as modification magic. The reporters immediately realize the significance of this revelation because it essentially means a completely new category of magic has been discovered. Kim also becomes extremely excited, saying that this development is revolutionary and will undoubtedly shake the entire magical community from this day forward. Meanwhile, Ji simply calls everything complete nonsense and asks whether Hyul seriously expects him to believe all of that. Hyul confidently tells him that he should. Although Ji is still suspicious and knows there is probably more to the story, he decides to accept it for now and congratulates him on his victory. Shortly afterward, Ji says he will return to the dormitory because he needs to prepare himself for tomorrow's difficult match since he will be facing a tough opponent. Hyul becomes curious and asks who this tough opponent could possibly be. The following day, he gets his answer inside the arena. Ji is struggling tremendously against a girl named Adela Starrett, a prodigy born from the Starrett family of France and the House of Mystics in Korea. Hyul explains that her magic is extremely unique because she possesses a secret attribute known as moon element magic. This mysterious magic combines both light and darkness and is not included within the open source magic database. Since information regarding its range, attack power, and limitations has never been publicly registered, opponents have no way of predicting how it works. As if proving that point, Adela immediately overwhelms Ji and defeats him without much difficulty. The instructor then blows the whistle and officially declares Adela the winner. However, after securing her victory, Adela suddenly turns and stares directly at Hyul with an intimidating gaze. The unexpected attention catches him off guard, and he begins wondering why she is looking at him that way. A little later, as Ji leaves the arena, Hyul praises him for doing his best and even offers him an energy drink. Ji then complains about how unlucky he was to have Adela as an opponent before asking Hyul if he won his own second match. Hyul confidently says that he obviously did. Hearing that, Ji tells him that he will need all the luck he can get for his next battle. At that exact moment, Adela walks over to them and compliments Ji for the fight he put up earlier. Then, while keeping her intense gaze fixed on Hyul, she asks whether he is finally returning to the path that a true mage should follow. She then tells him that the reason she enrolled in this academy is connected to him, and says that she hopes he will help her remember that reason once again. Hyul then explains that the Shin family and the House of Mystics have always maintained a good relationship, which is why he and Adela had many opportunities to meet during various events over the years. If he had to describe their relationship in a single word, he would call them rivals. Back when Hyul was considered a prodigy and consistently ranked first in tournaments, Adela was so determined to surpass him that she even gave up studying in France and enrolled at Obelisk Academy. However, everything changed after Hyul was declared incompatible with AI magic. From that day onward, the two of them stopped talking entirely. For Hyul, it was a devastating event, but for Adela, it also meant losing the rival that had motivated her all this time. Returning to the present, Hyul tells Adela that he still does not believe he is worthy of being her goal again. However, Adela simply walks away and tells him that they will find out once they fight each other. As she leaves, Ji immediately approaches Hyul and asks whether he is truly ready. Confused, Hyul asks him what exactly he is supposed to be ready for. Ji instantly loses his composure and starts shouting at him in disbelief. He asks whether Hyul seriously has no idea what is going on because his next opponent is none other than Adela herself. Hearing that suddenly sends Hyul into panic mode, and he wonders if that is actually true. The following day, Adela and the instructor are already waiting inside the arena while Hyul is nowhere to be seen. As time passes, his classmates who came to watch the match begin asking where he is. Before long, they start mocking him, saying that he probably got scared and ran away. They laugh among themselves and say that this is exactly the kind of behavior they expected from a loser. According to them, all his talk about modification magic during the interviews was nothing more than empty words. Eventually, the instructor announces that time is up and says that according to Academy rules, Adela will win the match by default. However, just before everything is finalized, Hyul suddenly rushes into the arena and shouts for the instructor to wait. Breathing heavily, he apologizes for being late. The instructor is clearly irritated and asks what took him so long to arrive, but he decides to hear the explanation later. As a penalty, he informs Hyul that he will not be given any extra time to recover before the match begins. As both of them take their positions, Adela immediately asks him why he was late. Hyul casually answers that it was nothing serious and says that he was simply making some preparations. Then he confidently reveals his infinity magic circle and explains that since Adela is a powerful opponent, he needed to prepare properly if he wanted to defeat her. Adela does not entirely believe him, since it was just one day, but she can clearly tell that something about him feels different compared to the previous day. Looking directly at him, she asks if she can finally expect to see his true strength. Hyul responds by giving her a warning. He tells her that she should fight with everything she has right from the beginning because if she holds back, she will definitely lose. The match finally begins, and Adela immediately launches an attack. Using her spell, Flame Revolver, she rapidly fires multiple fireballs toward Hyul. Without much difficulty, Hyul blocks every single one of them with his wind magic. Seeing that her first attack failed, Adela instantly follows up with another spell called Earth Needle. Then numerous sharp spikes suddenly emerge from the ground, nearly piercing Hyul. Fortunately, he reacts quickly and jumps high into the air to avoid them. Seeing him suspended in midair, Adela immediately seizes the opportunity and unleashes a powerful wind attack. Confidently, she says that there is no way he can dodge while airborne because anyone trapped in the air would have nowhere to escape. However, Hyul simply smirks at her reasoning. He admits that her strategy is clever because most people would indeed think that being in midair leaves them defenseless. But then, he calmly says that he is not like everyone else. At that moment, he uses barrier magic in an entirely unexpected way by creating a platform beneath his feet and stepping on it while still in the air. The entire audience is left speechless, including Adela herself. Everyone wonders how such a thing is even possible because barrier magic is supposed to be a defensive spell, not something that can be used as a floating platform. Even so, Adela cannot help but smile in admiration. She says that Hyul still possesses that same unique magical sense that always made him special. At the same time, Hyul tells her that her mystic magic she possesses is extremely powerful, and if he wants to overcome it, he will have to use everything at his disposal. Then, with complete confidence, he makes a bold declaration. In order to defeat her, he says that he will even summon the sun itself into this battle. Without wasting any time, Hyul puts his plan into action by using the sunlight itself to obstruct Adela's vision. Suddenly unable to see clearly, Adela realizes an attack is most likely coming her way and immediately switches to defense. She quickly activates her barrier magic, Great Shield, a powerful third circle defensive spell capable of protecting her from incoming attacks. At that moment, Hyul uses his arrow magic to form a sword and strikes her shield directly. However, the attack has no visible effect. Even so, Adela assumes he is simply being careful since he is using a first circle spell against a much stronger third circle defensive spell. The moment Hyul lands back on the ground after attacking her, Adela immediately prepares to launch her own counterattack. Confidently declaring that it is her turn now, she attempts to move forward, only to discover that she cannot move at all. To her surprise, Hyul has already trapped her using Earthbind. Shocked, she wonders when did he manage to cast the spell in the first place. She begins to suspect that he may have activated it the very instant he landed. At this point, Adela starts realizing just how dangerous Hyul has become because his movements are so fast that even her eyes are struggling to follow him. Taking advantage of the opening, Hyul quickly launches water missile toward her. Adela quickly regains her composure and blocks the attack using Great Shield once again. Despite that, she smirks and says that he is actually more manageable than she initially expected. In her mind, she concludes that Hyul must be relying on the fourth circle spell Memorize to maintain such incredible speed. Since she believes that he is only a fourth circle mage, she reasons that he can only attack her with first circle spells while using that technique. Because of that assumption, she remains confident. In her eyes, a first circle spell simply does not possess enough power to defeat her. However, her confidence instantly crumbles when a wind spear suddenly strikes her out of nowhere. The unexpected attack completely catches her off guard, leaving her wondering when he even had the chance to launch it. She quickly begins piecing things together and suspects that he may have hidden a modified wind spear within the sunlight from the very beginning. The attack sends Adela crashing onto the ground. Even though it is still only a first circle spell, its power is enough to deal considerable damage. Hyul then stares down at her and asks if she has forgotten who she is fighting against. He reminds her that he already warned her to use her full strength from the very start and questions why she chose to hold back instead. Meanwhile, inside the VIP room, Kim's assistant praises Hyul's combat instincts, saying they are beyond imagination. Kim then begins breaking down Hyul's entire strategy step by step. According to him, everything had already been planned from the moment Hyul avoided Adela's first attack, Earth Needle. By jumping into the air, he intentionally baited her into launching additional attacks. Kim continues explaining that Hyul then used barrier magic as a platform to climb even higher, while positioning himself within the sunlight to hide his movements. While doing so, he secretly prepared a delayed wind spear using Memorize. Then, as he descended, he used arrow magic to distract Adela and make her believe that the battle was taking place entirely on the ground. After trapping her with Earthbind and aligning himself with the position of the sun, he finally unleashed the precast wind spear at the perfect moment. Kim is thoroughly impressed by the entire sequence and tells both his assistant and Hyul's father that he finally understands why Hyul earned the title of the Grand Mage of the First Circle when he was still a child. His level of planning and creativity is simply extraordinary. However, Hyul's father remains calm and points out that, at the end of the day, it's still just a first circle magic and he cannot defeat Adela with it. To prove his point, he tells Kim to continue watching the match because Adela is already standing back up. According to him, even though Hyul created the perfect opportunity, he still failed to deliver a decisive finishing blow. More importantly, Adela has not yet used her strongest magic yet. As if proving his point, Adela looks at Hyul and admits that this fight has been truly impressive. She tells him that his performance reminds her of the old days. Then, with a serious expression, she announces that from this point onward, she will finally fight him with her full strength. With that declaration, she begins activating her most powerful spell, Halo. Adela's magic circle suddenly expands and shines so brightly that it engulfs the entire arena. The sheer scale of the spell immediately catches everyone's attention. Upon seeing this, Hyul's father calmly decides to leave his seat. Kim quickly notices and asks him why he is leaving so early. Without hesitation, he replies that there is no reason to stay any longer because, in his opinion, the battle is already over. However, before he can walk away, something unexpected happens. The entire audience suddenly erupts in shock. Kim, his assistant, Ji-sun-chan, and even Adela herself are all left speechless because they can clearly see Hyul using a second circle spell known as Flame Vulcan. Adela can hardly believe what she is witnessing. Hyul then reminds her that he already told her earlier that he was late because he was making preparations to defeat her. His words immediately surprise her. She asks whether he has already reached the fifth circle because she remembers that the spell Memorize limit was only up to a first circle spell, and if he is using Memorize and is still capable of casting a second circle spell, then that should be the only possible explanation. Instead of giving her a direct answer, Hyul simply stares at her confidently. At that moment, the story shifts back to the night before the match. Hyul had been sitting alone inside his room, carefully thinking about his strategy. He knew very well that Adela was not an opponent he could defeat by relying solely on first circle magic. After considering all his options, he realized he had no choice but to quickly advance to the second circle. Originally, his plan was to completely master first circle magic before moving on to the next stage. However, because of Adela, he decided he could no longer afford to wait. He opened iDread and began studying the newly unlocked page that explained the process of obtaining second circle magic. The book explained that he needed to pour his mana into the magic circle displayed on the following page. Doing so would guide him into an entirely new realm. Determined to succeed, Hyul immediately channels all of his mana into the magic circle without hesitation. Suddenly, the book emits an intense light and completely absorbs him inside. When Hyul opens his eyes again, he finds himself standing inside a massive library filled with countless books. Looking around in confusion, he wonders where exactly he has been transported. Before he can investigate further, a girl with a rather unusual hairstyle suddenly appears before him. She welcomes him to the first trial page and introduces herself as Alpha, the guide responsible for managing this trial. Hyul is immediately confused and asks what she means by the first trial page. Alpha then explains that this place exists inside iDread itself. Hearing that leaves Hyul stunned because he realizes he was never teleported somewhere far away as he thought before, but instead he is literally inside the book. The revelation amazes him because there are no known records of this kind of spatial magic existing anywhere in the world. Alpha then begins explaining the purpose of the trial. She says that this test will determine whether his Sime has been fully realized. The instructions will be given once the trial officially begins, and if he succeeds, pages 18 through 31 will be updated with the information necessary to achieve second circle magic. After explaining everything, Alpha looks at him and asks if he is ready to begin the trial. Without even a moment of hesitation, Hyul confidently replies that he is more than ready and tells her to start immediately. As soon as Alpha disappears, Hyul hears Baiteno's voice echoing around him. Baiteno begins explaining the details of the trial and summons a small crystal before him. He tells Hyul that the crystal is called Elemental Mana Light, an incomplete gem containing 4 different mana attributes mixed together in an unstable manner. Hyul's task is to completely purify it. Hearing this immediately makes him nervous because he knows how dangerous and delicate this crystal is. Even the slightest mistake while controlling mana could cause it to explode. In his mind, the challenge feels almost impossible, like trying to perfectly separate sugar, salt, and pepper after they have all been mixed together. He quickly realizes that only someone who has completely mastered Heart's intent would be capable of accomplishing something like this. Despite understanding the difficulty of the challenge, Hyul gradually becomes excited instead of discouraged. Seeing it as an opportunity to improve, he immediately begins the purification process. However, he loses concentration almost instantly, causing the crystal to release a violent shockwave that blasts him backward into a corner. He quickly understands the danger of the task. Even the smallest fluctuation in his mana control will trigger another shockwave that could seriously injure him. Nevertheless, Hyul refuses to give up. Determined to succeed, he tells himself that he will continue trying no matter how many attempts it takes. From that moment onward, he repeatedly challenges the trial. Every time his focus slips for even a brief moment, he is forced to start from the beginning again. He continues this process countless times, becoming so absorbed in the task that he completely loses track of time. Eventually, after endless failures and constant persistence, he finally succeeds in perfectly purifying the crystal. The unstable gem transforms into a complete and flawless elemental mana light crystal. Baiteno congratulates him for passing the trial and announces that he has successfully mastered Heart's Intent. As a reward, the Book of Idred is updated with the information regarding the second ring and the technique for weaving the resonance ring. A moment later, Hyul returns to reality and finds himself back inside his own room. He quickly notices that it is already morning, meaning he has very little time left before the match. Without wasting another second, he opens Idred and is delighted to see that the new pages have indeed been updated. The instructions needed to weave the second ring are now available before him. Filled with determination, he promises himself that he will master the second ring before stepping into the arena. Back in the present battle, Adela does not intend to give Hyul any opportunity to attack with his newly acquired magic. She immediately activates Halo and unleashes its overwhelming power in an attempt to completely crush him. Believing she has already secured victory, she calmly turns around and starts walking away from the battlefield. Even then, she admits that she is impressed by how much stronger Hyul has become in such a short amount of time. However, she sadly concludes that the genius she once admired no longer exists and decides that this will be the end of their rivalry. Suddenly, an unusual sound echoes from behind her. She turns around and is shocked to see Hyul standing once again. This time, he is simultaneously using 2 second circle spells, Resonance Activation and Darkness Blind. Then, he merges his 2 infinity magic circles together, allowing them to move freely as if they have become extensions of his own body. The entire audience is left stunned by the sight, including his father, who immediately stands up from his seat in disbelief. At that moment, an enormous magic circle materializes behind Hyul, accompanied by 2 gigantic hands. He then activates Flame Vulcan and aims it directly at Adela. She becomes confused because it appears to be a defensive spell. However, Hyul immediately activates Resonance version 1 and transforms Flame Vulcan into a massive Gatling gun. Without hesitation, he begins firing countless attacks toward Adela. She desperately attempts to defend herself, but even she realizes that resisting is pointless. Despite being overwhelmed, she smiles happily because she finally feels that Hyul has returned to being the rival she once admired. She accepts Hyul's attack head-on, and when the barrage finally ends, she collapses onto the ground. The instructor immediately announces that the match is over and declares Hyul the winner. The entire stadium erupts into cheers as everyone celebrates his victory. Meanwhile, Hyul's father quietly gets up and begins to leave. Kim notices this and asks whether he is leaving already. With a small smile, Hyul's father says that he has other appointments to attend to. Kim simply smiles back, pointing out that he is actually a terrible liar because it is obvious from his expression that he is genuinely happy. After leaving the arena, Hyul finally sits down to rest while countless spectators continue staring at him in amazement. As he catches his breath, he explains that the second infinity circle, Resonance, works perfectly alongside the Heart's Intent circle to amplify his magic. He had already understood that Moon Attribute magic was a hybrid magic that combined the range of light magic with the destructive power of dark magic. By carefully adjusting the intensity of the dark element, he was able to narrow its attack range and create a counter against Halo using enhanced dark magic. Since moon magic is a secret art exclusive to the House of Mystics, it is not something ordinary people can easily replicate. However, by carefully observing its structure, Hyul managed to perform extremely precise mana manipulation. Thanks to the resonance circle, he gained an unusual level of insight that allowed him to analyze moon magic itself, while the elemental mana light trial greatly refined his mana control abilities. He understands that without any one of these factors, defeating Adela would have been impossible. Just then, Kim approaches him and says that he has come to discuss something important with him. Kim then invites Hyul to his private VIP room. Once they are seated, Kim apologizes for taking up his time, saying that he understands Hyul must be exhausted after such an intense battle. However, he also compliments him, telling him that he thoroughly enjoyed watching the match and thought it was an outstanding performance. Hyul politely thanks him, but Kim immediately decides to get straight to the point. Without beating around the bush, he asks him a direct question. Has he already reached the 5th circle? The question instantly catches Hyul off guard, but he manages to stay calm on the outside. Deep down, he realizes why Kim would come to that conclusion. During the match, he openly used second circle magic, and since Kim likely believed he was relying on memorize, it would naturally lead someone to assume he had already reached the fifth circle. After all, for an ordinary mage, that would be the only logical explanation. Hyul quickly denies it and tells Kim that he has not reached the fifth circle yet. Kim immediately smiles and asks another question. If that is true, then how is he able to use second circle magic? Hyul tries to come up with an excuse and jokingly asks whether Kim would believe him if he said he used vision magic. Surprisingly, Kim says yes and asks if it was either transformation magic or his modification magic. Hyul awkwardly agrees and decides to go along with that explanation, even though he knows it is completely false. At the same time, Hyul thinks to himself that even reaching the fifth circle at 18 years old would already be unbelievable to the entire world. If people found out the truth now, it would create an enormous uproar, especially once he starts using even higher level magic in the future. He knows that revealing everything too early would only create unnecessary problems for him, so he decides that keeping it hidden is the safest option. Even so, Kim still seems slightly suspicious. He admits that the vision magic Hyul displayed was incredible, but he still does not understand how it explains the use of second circle magic. Sweat begins forming on Hyul's face as he quickly improvises another lie. He tells Kim that he also improved the memorize spell itself, which allowed him to use second circle magic during the battle. Instead of becoming more suspicious, Kim suddenly becomes excited. He immediately stands up from his seat and praises Hyul, saying that this is an incredible achievement. He even pats him on the shoulder, expressing how impressed he is that Hyul managed to improve one of Memorize's biggest weaknesses. However, in the very next moment, Kim's eyes begin glowing red, and a powerful aura spreads throughout the entire room, while Hyul quietly remains seated. After a few seconds, Kim withdraws his aura and tells Hyul that he believes him now. He explains that there are no visible monolines around him, which are characteristics commonly seen in fifth circle mages. Because of that, he is now certain that Hyul has not reached the fifth circle yet. Satisfied with his conclusion, Kim tells him that he will head outside and explain everything to the reporters himself. After Kim leaves, Hyul lets out a sigh of relief. He never expected the master of the Blue Tower to personally verify him using the red jade magic eyes. He recalls hearing that Kim Gangjin possesses one of the world's greatest detection abilities, allowing him to perceive the very essence of mana itself. Thinking back on it now, Hyul realizes how fortunate he was to escape suspicion, because Baiteno-style magic is his greatest secret, and he absolutely cannot reveal it carelessly. Sometimes later, Hyul easily wins his fourth match just like before. As he prepares to return to his dormitory afterward, Adela suddenly stops him. Surprised to see her, Hyul asks why she is here instead of resting and recovering from her injuries. Adela calmly replies that she is already feeling fine and politely asks if she could receive some feedback regarding their previous battle. But she also mentions that since the final match is near, they could postpone it if he is too tired. However, Hyul immediately says they should do it now, because discussing the match would also benefit him. He then tells her to follow him to the waiting room. As Adela walks behind him, she cannot hide her excitement. Her eyes sparkle with curiosity as she thinks about how much she can still learn from him, especially regarding strategy and the way he uses magic. She even wonders if one day she will be able to become as strong as he is. Meanwhile, Hyul suddenly feels an intense gaze from behind him. He quietly thinks to himself that he can practically feel the overwhelming heat coming from Adela, especially since she seems to be strangely staring at his ass. Meanwhile, at the headquarters of the Shin Group, Hyul's recent matches are being displayed on a massive television screen. Watching the footage, his older sister, Shin Seiya, cannot hide her frustration. She had believed everything was settled the moment Hyul was declared incompatible with AI magic, yet now he is once again drawing attention from the entire magic community. Worried, she turns toward her older brother, Shin Jihan, and asks whether they are really going to ignore the situation. More specifically, she fears the possibility that their father might decide to bring Hyul back into the family. Seiya reminds Jihan of what happened a year ago and says that he, of all people, should understand why she is worried. Back then, Hyul's talent overshadowed everyone around him, and the pressure it created within the family was overwhelming. She admits that she does not want to experience that kind of situation again. However, Jihan remains completely calm. He tells her not to worry because the Hyul of today is nothing like the prodigy he once was. In his eyes, Hyul is simply someone relying on second circle magic and clever tricks to stay relevant. Trying to reassure her further, Jihan points out that all of Hyul's opponents so far have only been around the third circle level. According to him, if Hyul were forced to face true fourth circle magicians, the outcome would be completely different. He explains that Hyul's greatest weakness still remains his incompatibility with AI magic. While his unusual techniques and forbidden-style magic may help him compensate for that flaw to some extent, Jihan insists that Hyul is still far below the standard of a proper fourth-circle mage. No matter how impressive his victories appear, his overall level is still lacking. Hearing this, Seiya finally starts to relax. She admits that she had reached a similar conclusion herself. In her opinion, no matter how hard Hyul struggles, he is still only crawling forward, while everyone else continues advancing. An AI-incompatible loser like Hyul will always remain limited by that flaw. Jihan nods in agreement, and adds that even if Hyul somehow becomes a threat to the future head of the family, they can simply deal with the problem when the time comes. To emphasize his point, he casually crushes the cup in his hand using his power, demonstrating just how confident he is. Later that evening, the final match of the tournament comes to an end. Hyul secures yet another victory, and the instructor proudly announces him as the champion of the second-year midterm examination. The entire arena erupts into cheers as countless spectators celebrate his triumph. Many of them shout that the prodigy has finally returned, while others praise him as a true member of the Shin family. Some even go as far as saying that his newly discovered forbidden magic surpasses the capabilities of AI magic itself, admitting that Hyul is truly a genius of their generation. Standing before the roaring crowd, Hyul simply waves with a smile. At the same time, Ji-sun-chan rushes toward him in excitement. He grabs Hyul and starts shaking him enthusiastically while loudly proclaiming how incredible his achievement is. Ji cannot stop talking about how everyone has finally acknowledged Hyul's talent. Hyul tries to calm him down, but Ji is far too excited to listen. Not everyone shares that excitement, however. Several classmates watch from the side with expressions filled with jealousy and frustration. Some claim that Hyul only won because he got lucky, while others insist that he would be nothing without his strange forbidden magic. Despite their complaints, even their homeroom teacher approaches Hyul with a smile and congratulates him. He admits that he never imagined the student who once ranked at the very bottom of the academy would one day stand at the very top. Seeing how proud their teacher looks, Ji immediately takes advantage of the situation. He jokingly asks whether the teacher plans to treat the entire class to celebrate Hyul's victory. To everyone's surprise, the teacher says he was already planning to do exactly that. The moment those words leave his mouth, the class erupts into excitement and cheers. Unfortunately, Hyul apologizes and says he will not be able to attend. Although he would love to join the celebration, he has an important appointment that he cannot miss. Ji becomes visibly disappointed and complains that a party is meaningless without the guest of honor. Even so, Hyul apologizes once again and explains that he has a very important promise to keep. Without wasting any more time, Hyul leaves the arena and heads outside. Waiting for him there is the Shin family's butler, who greets him respectfully and informs him that the head of the family is waiting. The butler then escorts him toward the main residence of the Shin family. As they arrive, Hyul cannot help but admire the enormous mansion standing before him, because it's been a long time for him seeing his home. While looking at the familiar estate, Hyul reflects on everything that has happened over the past year. Ever since he was declared incompatible with AI magic, he had effectively been cast aside by the family. After clashing with his father and moving into the academy dormitories, he had not been allowed to set foot inside the family home. Now, for the first time in a year, he is finally returning. As he steps through the entrance, memories begin flooding back. Looking around, he notices that nothing has really changed. The mansion looks exactly the same as he remembers it. A small smile forms on his face as he quietly thinks to himself that he finally made it back home. Hyul stepped into his father's study and immediately felt the familiar pressure that always filled the room. Sitting behind a large desk was Shin In-hyuk, the head of the Shin family, calmly waiting for him. Hyul greets him respectfully, and his father motioned for him to sit. For a brief moment, silence filled the room before In-hyuk starts telling him that he used to think that Hyul is a complete failure. Then, as he rose from his chair and slowly walked towards Hyul, he begins telling him that he thought like that because his casting speed was 20 times slower than average, whose spells vanished the moment his concentration slipped, and who could not even perform basic multicasting. In every measurable way, Hyul had been considered the perfect example of how hopeless an AI-incompatible mage could be. Yet despite all those shortcomings, everyone had acknowledged that he possessed extraordinary talent. That was why In-hyuk had pushed him toward AI magic in the first place, believing it was the only way to make use of that talent. Stopping behind Hyul's chair, In-hyuk admitted that even then, he had never truly expected success. To him, Hyul's stubborn refusal to give up magic had looked like nothing more than the desperate struggle of someone cornered by reality. When the article about Hyul's upcoming duel with Baek appeared, In-hyuk had actually welcomed it. He assumed Hyul would suffer a humiliating defeat in front of the entire academy and finally accept his limitations. However, the result had been the complete opposite. Hyul had shattered every expectation by overcoming his incompatibility and creating a completely new form of magic. Whether people called it modification magic or transformation magic, the achievement was undeniable. Returning to his seat, In-hyuk looked directly at his son and for perhaps the first time in years allowed a faint smile to appear on his face. He declared that Hyul had won their wager and had proven himself worthy of being called a true mage. Those words struck Hyul harder than any spell ever could. For a moment he simply sat there, unable to process what he had heard. Then he quickly stood up, gratitude written all over his face as he thanked his father. In-hyuk, however, was not finished. He informed Hyul that from this point onward the Shin family would provide full support for his magical studies. Any resources he required would be made available to him. More importantly, he was officially allowed to return to the Shin family residence. For the past year, he had been treated like an outcast, forced to live away from home after being branded a failure. Now, that exile was finally over. Yet even while offering recognition, In-hyuk remained as strict as ever. His expression hardened as he reminded Hyul that as the rightful successor of the Shin family, he needs to serve his family well. If he ever showed signs of stagnating or wasting his talent, In-hyuk would personally destroy his magic circles himself. As the terrifying aura of an 8th circle mage filled the room, Hyul instinctively felt his body tense. The pressure was immense, making it difficult to even breathe. Despite that, he met his father's gaze without looking away. He understood that this was not merely a threat, but also a test. In-hyuk wanted to know whether Hyul truly possessed the determination to continue walking this path. After a moment, his father asked him a simple question. If he truly wished to become the next head of the Shin family, then what was his immediate goal? Compared to his 4 siblings, Hyul was still the furthest behind in terms of status and accomplishments. How exactly does he intend to close that gap? Without hesitation, Hyul gave his answer. His ultimate objective remained unchanged. He would become the next head of the Shin family. To achieve that, however, he first needed to force everyone in the family to acknowledge his worth. And the opportunity to do that was approaching rapidly. In 2 months, the World Academy Olympiad would begin, bringing together the greatest young mages from across the globe. Hyul declared that he intended to participate in that tournament and return home with a gold medal. Hearing such a bold statement, In-hyuk folds his arms covering his mouth and stares at him intensely. The World Academy Olympiad was not an ordinary competition. It was often referred to as the Olympics of Mages, a stage where only the most talented academy students under the age of 20 could compete. The event attracted worldwide attention and was considered comparable to the adult professional level tournaments. Korea's best result in its entire history was merely a silver medal won by Kim Kangjin, the current Blue Tower Lord. Winning gold was something many geniuses dreamed about, but very few could realistically achieve. In-hyuk pointed this out, asking Hyul if he truly understood how unrealistic his declaration sounded. Hyul nodded without hesitation. Of course he understood. That was precisely why he was willing to stake everything on it. However, he also has a condition for his father. For the next 2 months leading up to the Olympiad, he wants his father to prevent his siblings from interfering with him. If he was going to devote himself entirely to training, he could not afford distractions or political games within the family. In-hyuk was mildly surprised by the request. Most people would have asked for money, artifacts, or special training opportunities. Instead, Hyul was asking for protection. In-hyuk even admits the boldness of the boy because he was essentially using a gold medal he had not yet won as leverage to secure support in advance. Normally, In-hyuk would have dismissed such a demand immediately, but after witnessing Hyul's recent growth, he found himself intrigued. After a brief pause, he agreed. The following morning, Hyul woke up sprawled across the floor of his dorm room. At some point during the night, he had fallen asleep while reading Idrid. Rubbing his eyes, he sat up and looked at the ancient book lying beside him. As soon as he returned from the family estate, he had been obsessed with figuring out the requirements for the next trial. Although he had successfully completed the first trial and reached the second circle, advancing further was proving far more difficult. According to Idrid, he needed to clear the second trial in order to unlock the third circle, but the clues provided were frustratingly vague. The book explained that he needed to form a connection between the Ring of Judgment and the Ring of Resonance. Following the instructions, Hyul repeatedly manipulated his mana, constructing the rings exactly as described. Every attempt appeared correct, yet the book stubbornly refused to acknowledge his progress. No matter how many times he tried, something was missing. The more he thought about it, the more irritated he became. It felt as though he was staring directly at the answer, but could not quite grasp it. Eventually, Hyul decided that forcing the issue would accomplish nothing. Sometimes the best way to solve a problem was to step away from it. Throwing on an oversized outfit and a hat to avoid attracting attention, he left the dormitory and headed into the city. The cool morning air felt refreshing as he wandered through the streets with breakfast in hand. Taking a bite while walking, he tried to clear his thoughts and focus on the concept of resonance. If he wants to pass the next trial, he would need to understand the deeper meaning behind the technique rather than simply follow the instructions written in the book. And so, with no destination in mind, Hyul continued walking through the city, determined to uncover the secret hidden within the realm of resonance. As Hyul wandered through the city streets, trying to clear his mind and think about the mystery behind the next trial, disaster struck out of nowhere. A plastic shopping bag suddenly flew through the air and smacked him directly in the face. Completely caught off guard, he stumbled backward and crashed onto the ground. Rubbing his sore nose, he complained about his terrible luck, only to hear hurried footsteps approaching. A familiar girl quickly stopped in front of him and asked if he was all right. To his surprise, the culprit turned out to be Adela. After making sure he wasn't injured, Adela repeatedly apologized for what happened. Curious, Hyul asked how a plastic bag could possibly fly hard enough to knock someone down. Embarrassed, Adela explained that she had been happily spinning around because she had just bought her favorite drink, banana milk. Unfortunately, while she was celebrating, the bag slipped out of her hand and became an airborne weapon. She apologizes once again, but Hyul couldn't help but laugh at the ridiculous explanation. He told her not to worry since the accident had at least earned him a free banana milk. As they began walking together, he noticed that she was carrying an entire collection of banana milk bottles and asked if she still drank only that. Adela proudly declared that banana milk was humanity's greatest invention and therefore deserved her unwavering loyalty. Looking at the absurd amount she had purchased, Hyul thought to himself that her obsession was somehow even stronger than before. The two of them continued walking through the city while sipping their drinks. During their conversation, Adela mentioned hearing rumors that Hyul had finally returned home. He nodded and explained that it was true. He had officially returned to the Shin family's Magic Tower residence the previous day. Since the Shin family also controlled one of the Magic Tower, so both places were essentially his home and the Magic Tower as well. Adela smiled and told him that she was genuinely happy for him. After everything he had gone through, she felt he deserved to return. She then asked whether his childhood dream of becoming the head of the Magic Tower was still the same. Hyul looked surprised that she even remembered such an old conversation. Adela reminded him that he used to talk about it constantly when they were children. However, Hyul shook his head saying that his dream had changed. Hearing this really surprises Adela, but she understands saying that Hyul had no choice but to compromise with his dream. After all, he has many prominent siblings and competing to be the head won't be easy. However, Hyul tells her that she is thinking is wrong because becoming the head of a single magic tower was no longer enough for him. Looking toward the sky, he declared that his goal now was to master all forms of magic and stand at the very pinnacle of every mage and every magic tower in the world. The sheer scale of that ambition stunned Adela. Coincidentally, it was a dream very similar to her own. Still, she kept that thought to herself and simply smiled. As his rival, She found his determination inspiring. If anything, it made her even more motivated to continue chasing after him. Later at night, far away at the Shin family headquarters, the atmosphere was much less pleasant. Shin Se-ah was pacing angrily as she slams on the table. She asks her brother if he isn't worried at all. With a nonchalant look, he tells her that their father must have had his reason, but he truly couldn't believe that their father would set such conditions. Earlier that night, both siblings had been summoned and given a direct command by Shin In-hyuk himself. For the next 2 months, neither of them was allowed to interfere with Hayeol in any way. Se-ah nearly exploded in protest, but Jihan stopped her before she could openly challenge their father. Jihan then calmly asked for an explanation. In-hyuk simply tells them that Hayeol had spent an entire year separated from the family. Since he had only recently returned, he deserved time to readjust without being dragged into internal conflicts. That's why he decided to give Hayeol 2 months to adapt to the family, especially since he knows that the two of them would have kept a close watch on Hayeol since he will be competing with them to become the head of the family. On hearing this, Jihan with a smile tells his father that he understands and agrees with him. But back in the present, Se-ah still couldn't understand the reasoning and asked her brother why did he leave without saying anything to their father. But she gets shocked when she sees her brother irritated, ugly face because he was really angry and he couldn't just accept their father's condition. He starts telling Se-ah that he knows that their other elder sibling wasn't interested in competing for the head position. That's why they were the only one called to the meeting. But what he doesn't understand is that why did their father give them that condition because he had never been someone who cared about such things. Normally, he would have considered a year-long absence to be proof that someone lacked the qualifications necessary to become an heir. Besides, protection within the family usually ended at 16. Before AI imprinting took place, Hayeol was already 17, which meant he should have been treated like any other competitor. So why would their father give them that condition? None of it made sense. Se-ah nervously wondered whether their father had somehow discovered the surveillance they had placed on Hayeol. Jihan immediately dismissed the idea. If their father truly knew everything, the situation would be much worse. Instead, he believed there was another explanation. Perhaps In-hyuk had seen something special in Hayeol's recent growth. Maybe he was interested in the mysterious magic system Hayeol had developed, or perhaps Hayeol had negotiated some kind of private agreement with him. The possibility surprised Se-ah. A deal between Hayeol and their father would explain a lot. Suddenly realizing the danger, she asked whether she should withdraw all the people she had secretly assigned to monitor him. Jihan nodded. If the Shadows discovered them, it would create unnecessary problems. The Shadows were the Magic Tower's elite intelligence unit, personally controlled by their father. They specialized in infiltration, surveillance, escort missions, and information gathering. Very few people could evade them since they are really good and there is nothing they can't do. Jihan revealed that he had already withdrawn every agent he had assigned to observe Hayeol. Hearing that only made Se-ah feel even more helpless. If even Jihan was backing off, the situation was more serious than she thought. When she finally asked what he planned to do next, Jihan stood up and prepared to leave. Outwardly, he claimed he was simply going out for some business. Internally, however, his thoughts were much darker. No matter what explanations existed, he couldn't shake the feeling that something dangerous was happening behind the scenes. If Hayeol had truly struck a deal with their father, then the balance of power within the Shin family could change dramatically. Because of that possibility, even if Se-ah agrees to do nothing for 2 months, that doesn't sit right with him. So, Jihan decided he needed outside information. There was only one place that might provide the answers he needed. With a cold expression on his face, he left the headquarters and quietly made his way toward the Black Tower. The next day, a cheerful atmosphere fills the classroom at Obelisk Academy as the teacher walks in wearing his familiar bright smile and announces that the midterm examinations have officially ended. The students immediately let out a shared sigh of relief as though a tremendous burden has finally been lifted from their shoulders. The teacher then tells his students that first, let's start with an applause because their class is fortunate enough to have the Academy's highest-ranking student among them. The class applauds automatically, although several students wear stiff smiles that fail to hide their true feelings. Shin Hayeol calmly rises from his seat and makes his way to the front, accepting the certificate respectfully with both hands. Even though the applause fills the room, the quiet whispers from his classmates leave a far deeper impression. The teacher warmly congratulates him, announcing that Hayeol not only claimed first place in the class but also achieved the highest score across the entire country. Hyul simply responds with a composed smile and thanks him politely, appearing completely unsurprised by the recognition. The teacher continues by explaining that earning first place comes with greater responsibility. Hyul must maintain his position for the next 2 months and aim to compete in the Academy Olympiad. Hyul calmly replies that he had already been considering it, then quietly returns to his seat while the whispers throughout the classroom become even louder. Some students claim that his achievements are possible only because of his vision magic, while others criticize him for acting overly confident. A few insist that an outcast like him will never be able to keep the title for long, predicting that his ranking will barely last a week. Others quietly laugh among themselves, yet Hyul remains completely unaffected, taking his seat with the same calm expression as if none of the comments had reached him. When the final bell rings, students immediately flood into the hallways, eager to leave the classroom behind. Ji Sunshin slowly follows the crowd, dragging his feet while letting out an exaggerated yawn, complaining that sitting through 8 straight theory classes should practically be considered torture. Hyul happens to pass by just then, and Ji Sunshin brightens slightly as Hyul remarks that tomorrow will at least consist mostly of practical lessons. Ji tells him that it's still difficult for him. Laughing softly, Hyul playfully punches him in the chest and tells him to spend more time exercising. The light punch instantly sends Ji Sunshin collapsing dramatically to the ground as though his entire body has lost its strength. Shaking his head, Hyul teases him for being so weak and wonders how someone training to become a mage can possess so little physical strength. Ji Sunshin pouts, calling himself someone lacking magical talent and complaining that even magic itself seems determined to make fun of him. Still smiling, Hyul encourages him to overcome that weakness instead of complaining about it, prompting Ji Sunshin to clench his fists and boldly declare that one day he will become strong enough to return the punch, although his words sound far more hopeful than intimidating. Hearing his response, Hyul laughs even harder before casually suggesting that they should head to the training room together after dinner for a change of pace. Ji Sunshin immediately freezes like a dumb ass and stammers nervously until Hyul folds his arms and remarks that he can simply refuse if he is afraid. Ji Sunshin quickly explains that he has nothing against training itself, but absolutely dislikes training alongside Hyul. Looking puzzled, Hyul asks what exactly he has done wrong that would make him hate that much to train with him. Ji Sunshin honestly admits that every time Hyul trains at the academy gym, everyone watches with expressions that makes him uncomfortable. He really hates the way people look at him. The scene then shifts to Hyul effortlessly lifting absurdly heavy weights while the surrounding students stare in complete disbelief, sweating simply from witnessing the display and quietly questioning whether someone capable of such feats can even be considered human. Back in the training room, Hyul carefully places the weights down before wiping away the sweat on his forehead and taking a drink from his water bottle. As he rests, he reflects on how deeply absorbed he became in mastering the Baiteno style of magic that he nearly neglected the importance of physical training. He recalls the teachings written in the Book of Idred that it's clearly written the infinity circle, being a huge circle that flows throughout the entire body, interacts with physical training. A strong body and a strong circle create synergy, improving efficiency. Understanding the importance of balancing both aspects, Hyul decides that instead of sacrificing one for the other, he will continue strengthening both his physical abilities and his magical power equally. The following day, Hyul takes part in monster combat training on the academy grounds. Several holographic beasts resembling cheetahs, each possessing a strange third eye, surround him while preparing to attack. As they rush toward him, he immediately leaps away, tracing a circular motion through the air as crystal needles descend from above and pierce the first creature, causing it to disappear instantly. The remaining 2 monsters attack together, but Hyul ducks at precisely the right moment, allowing them to collide directly with each other. Seizing the opportunity, he moves between them and casts Flame Vulcan, instantly erasing one of the beasts. The last creature attempts another attack, but Hyul continues skillfully avoiding it with smooth footwork until the instructor finally announces the end of the exercise. Teacher Chang-Hu checks the results displayed on his tablet before announcing that Hyul has achieved a flawless score with perfect points. Hyul respectfully thanks his instructor with a sweaty smile. After sitting down on a nearby bench, he studies his own hand while realizing how dramatically his physical abilities have improved thanks to the infinite circle, estimating that his body's overall strength has increased by nearly 1.5 points. Tightening his fist with determination, He reminds himself that when he reaches the third circle, it will allow him to become even stronger, meaning he must continue pushing harder. He needs to further enhance the infinity circle. Closing his eyes, he carefully focuses and adjusts the vibration frequency and rotational speed of every circle by incredibly small amounts, while also increasing the purity of the mana flowing through the ring of will. Sweat slowly forms across his body as he struggles to synchronize everything perfectly. Although the circles nearly align and his synchronization reaches 99%, the final 1% stubbornly refuses to fall into place. Even so, Yahello refuses to surrender, clenching his fist as he silently vows to continue trying until he succeeds. That night, the city streets shimmer beneath glowing neon lights as Yahello jogs through the roads with wireless earbuds in his ears, allowing the music to set his pace. Turning into a narrow alley, he remains completely unaware that someone has been following him until a fist suddenly swings toward him from behind. He narrowly avoids the attack and quickly turns around, only to find a mysterious figure dressed entirely in black standing silently within the shadows. Rising to his feet, Yahello demands to know who is attacking him, but the stranger says nothing and simply continues approaching. As the hood shifts slightly, Yahello catches a brief glimpse of the person's hair and eyes. His expression immediately freezes in shock as recognition dawns upon him. The person hidden beneath the disguise is none other than Baek Sahyuk. Before Yahello can even finish speaking, Sahyuk suddenly rushes toward him and throws a punch with all his strength. Despite the force behind the attack, it fails to connect, and the frustration on Sahyuk's face makes it clear that the missed strike wounds his pride even more than his hand. Unable to land a hit, he begins hurling insults instead, mocking Yahello for dodging so well and comparing him to a rat. Remaining completely calm, Yahello crouches down to retrieve his wireless earbuds from the ground before casually mentioning that it's the weekend, and why didn't he go home. Looking back at Sahyuk with a mocking grin, he remarks that it is not a matter of Sahyuk choosing not to go home, but rather that he is unable to because of his probation, right? Yahello points out that even if Sahyuk wanted to leave, his family would not permit it. As he stands to face him directly, the taunt causes Sahyuk's body to tremble with rage, and he yells at Yahello to be quiet before threatening to kill him. Instead of being intimidated, Yahello bursts into laughter, sounding as though he has just heard something amusing rather than a serious threat. He mocks Sahyuk further by saying that after relying so heavily on his family's influence, this pitiful outcome is all he has to show for it. Yahello continues by saying that even without probation, Sahyuk should probably avoid going home because it would simply be too humiliating. Tilting his head slightly, he adds one final insult, suggesting that perhaps Sahyuk no longer has anywhere he truly belongs. Every word pushes Sahyuk's anger even further until his face turns bright red with fury. Unable to control himself any longer, he raises his hand as mana erupts around it and shouts that Yahello has gone too far, and he curses at him, calling him daddy. My bad, I mean bastard. Fueled entirely by rage, Sahyuk charges once more with a fire spell swirling violently around his hand while yelling at the top of his lungs. Yahello instantly sharpens his focus and reacts with flawless precision, avoiding the attack while grabbing Sahyuk's wrist in one smooth movement. Catching hold of his clothing from behind, Yahello completely throws him off balance before sweeping his leg beneath him and forcefully slamming him onto the ground by his hood. Sahyuk cries out in pain but continues struggling and shouting for Yahello to release him. Watching the outburst calmly, Yahello quietly realizes this presents the perfect opportunity for him. Almost immediately afterward, members of Obelisk Academy's monitoring team arrive at the scene and quickly surround Sahyuk, restraining both of his arms. Even while being held down, Sahyuk continues screaming and swearing that he will kill Yahello if they let him go, until one of the monitors firmly orders him to be silent and informs him that everything will be dealt with later. Letting out a relaxed sigh, Yahello watches the situation unfold before calmly explaining everything to a nearby academy guard. He states that he was forced to stop Sahyuk because magic had been used against him, and reminds the guard that the entire incident should already have been recorded by the academy's CCTV system. The guard nods while explaining that the matter will be properly handled the following day, and advises Yahello to return to the dormitory since it is already late. As Sahyuk is dragged into the patrol vehicle while still shouting curses, Yahello quietly watches him leave and thinks to himself that Baek Sahyuk should continue behaving exactly like this in the future. The following morning, large crowds of students gather around the academy's notice board as a newly posted announcement immediately becomes the center of attention. Conversations spread rapidly throughout the hallway as everyone discusses what happened over the weekend. The notice officially states that Baek Sahyuk illegally used magic outside academy grounds and has therefore received an additional probation penalty. According to the announcement issued by the Obelisk Academy administration, 10 points have been deducted from his record as punishment for violating academy regulations. One student questioned why the punishment amounts to only a 10-point deduction, wondering whether that is truly the full consequence for such an offense. Another student quickly responds that using magic off campus would normally result in immediate expulsion, making the surprisingly light punishment difficult to understand. Hyul arrives while the discussion is still ongoing and quietly reads the notice himself. Inwardly, he reflects that after causing such a serious disturbance, Sahyuk still escaped with only a point deduction, which is exactly what he expected. Hyul knows the Baek family must have intervened immediately because they are a newly established prestigious family that invested heavily in donations to the academy to obtain a title and to have a higher standing. Thanks to that influence, the academy cannot afford to impose a harsher punishment. As he continues walking through the hallway, Hyul imagines that Sahyuk is probably receiving an intense scolding from his father at that very moment. Meanwhile, Sahyuk is indeed enduring exactly that as his father's furious voice echoes through a phone call. He repeatedly apologizes in an anxious tone, but his father continues shouting, demanding to know why remaining quiet until graduation is apparently so difficult for him. Sahyuk hesitantly admits that it is harder than he expected, but the response only fuels his father's anger even more. He warns Sahyuk that if the family loses its prestige and the title because of his reckless behavior, the responsibility will fall entirely on him. Startled by the harsh warning, Sahyuk immediately promises that he will remember his father's words. However, as soon as the call ends, cold sweat runs down his neck. Overcome with frustration, he smashes his phone against a nearby pillar before repeatedly muttering Hyul's name through clenched teeth. His fury continues growing as he stomps on the shattered device, blaming every bit of his humiliation on Hyul. Just then, a teacher unexpectedly appears nearby, wearing a calm and gentle smile that somehow feels unusually deliberate. In a quiet voice, the teacher remarks that Sahyuk seems to hold quite a deep grudge against Hyul, causing Sahyuk to turn in surprise. Grinding his teeth, he recognizes the man as Instructor Smith and demands to know what he wants. Smith calmly steps closer while maintaining his pleasant smile, explaining that it is perfectly natural for people to either like or dislike someone. Leaning in slightly, his voice lowers into something far more unsettling as he quietly asks whether Sahyuk truly has no desire to take revenge against Shin Hyul. The question sends an uncomfortable feeling through Sahyuk as the atmosphere suddenly grows much heavier. Later that night, Hyul sits quietly at the desk inside his academy room while calmly scrolling through his phone. Thinking back on everything involving Baek Sahyuk, he admits to himself that although he could have retaliated much more severely, the current outcome has actually benefited him more. Soon afterward, a new message arrives from his father congratulating him and informing him that negotiations with the Baek family have successfully concluded. In exchange for keeping the incident quiet, the Shin family has been granted 3% of the Baek family's mining rights. His father even tells Hyul that he is willing to grant him a personal reward if there is something he desires. Reading the message, Hyul smiles with satisfaction, understanding that in order for the Baek family to get a title, they need to preserve good relationships with other influential families rather than relying solely on the academy. Since Hyul is a direct descendant of the Shin family, the Baek family had no option but to settle the matter through significant concessions. Reflecting on the situation, Hyul reminds himself that a title represents far more than simple wealth. It serves as the symbol of a family's social standing and honor, much like the title of Mage represents a distinguished mage family, while Mystic signifies a respected mystic clan. Considering everything that has happened, he concludes that Baek Sahyuk has essentially become an outcast within his own family. Combined with Sahyuk's current level of ability, Hyul believes he poses no real threat anymore. Feeling that the matter has finally come to an end, Hyul lets out a quiet sigh before putting the entire incident behind him and returning his full attention to his cultivation. The following morning, fresh rumors spread throughout the academy suggesting that instructor regulations have become stricter after the recent incident involving Sahyuk. While walking through the academy grounds, Hyel suddenly hears a middle-aged voice calling his name. Turning around with slight hesitation, he finds Instructor Smith greeting him with a warm smile. Smith quietly studies him with an unusually strange gaze that immediately makes Hyel feel uncomfortable, before suddenly laughing in a relaxed manner and commenting that Hyel appears to dislike him. Hyel politely denies it, but Smith continues speaking, explaining that although his previous words may have sounded harsh, they were genuinely intended as sincere advice and should not be misunderstood. Hyel outwardly agrees with respectful politeness, yet inwardly he cannot help questioning why Smith has suddenly changed his attitude. Keeping his friendly expression, Smith suggests putting their differences behind them and extends his hand, inviting Hyel to shake it, saying that from now onwards they should start over. Feeling awkward, Hyel politely replies that such a gesture is unnecessary. Almost immediately, the atmosphere becomes strangely tense, and Hyel instinctively senses that something is wrong without understanding exactly why. Watching Smith carefully with widened eyes, he wonders why the surroundings suddenly feel so oppressive. Smith's smile gradually twists into something far more unsettling as he congratulates Hyel on earning first place in the midterm examinations before wishing him success on the path ahead. Although the words themselves sound perfectly courteous, the overwhelming killing intent hidden beneath them causes sweat to form across Hyel's forehead. Even though the mana surrounding Smith appears completely normal, something deep inside tells Hyel that this instructor is anything but ordinary. Even from a distance, the oppressive aura sends chills through his body, causing his thoughts to race. After carefully analyzing the feeling, he reaches the conclusion that such a sinister power could only belong to the Black Tower. His muscles instinctively tense as memories of its infamous reputation flood his mind. While the 12 towers are publicly recognized throughout the world, the Black Tower is nothing more than a corrupt imitation created by a deranged mage who boldly proclaimed himself the Black Magician King. Hyel's expression grows serious as countless possibilities race through his head. If Instructor Smith is truly connected to the Black Tower, could other instructors within the academy also be involved? If that is the case, how long has this corruption been spreading unnoticed within the academy? Taking a slow breath, Hyel forces himself to remain calm, reminding himself that answering those questions can come later. Right now, understanding the spell before him is far more important, so he focuses completely on analyzing its magical formula. The magic surrounding Smith spreads through the air like an approaching storm, filling the area with dark, shadow-like energy. As Hyel studies the spell more carefully, his eyes widen after recognizing a structure that seems strangely familiar. A troubling realization quickly forms in his mind, making his heart grow heavy. The spell is designed for mind control. He immediately understands that his own mind has remained immune to outside interference, meaning Smith's technique cannot truly affect him. Quietly closing his eyes, Hyel feels relieved that his natural resistance has protected him once again. Meanwhile, everyone else nearby behaves completely normally, showing no signs that anything unusual is taking place. Realizing the opportunity before him, Hyel decides the safest course of action is to pretend that the spell has successfully taken control of him. If he acts like an obedient puppet, he may be able to gather valuable information about the Black Tower without raising anyone's suspicion. When he opens his eyes again, he deliberately empties his expression, and Smith immediately notices the lifeless look, smiling with satisfaction. Smith steps closer and speaks with obvious contempt, bitterly complaining that someone he considers nothing more than a cripple fool, incapable of properly using an AI chip, somehow managed to force him into apologizing. He laughs mockingly before placing a tiny cube into Hyel's hand and orders him to keep it with him from now on. Maintaining the act perfectly, Hyel simply responds with a calm agreement while secretly remaining alert. Although he briefly wonders whether the conversation has already ended, Smith immediately gives another command, demanding that Hyel reveal the reason behind the sudden changes in his magic. A wave of anger rises within Hyel because he has absolutely no intention of exposing his greatest secret. Instead, he suddenly grabs his own head with both hands and lets out a loud scream, pretending that unbearable pain is tearing apart his mind. Smith instantly becomes alarmed and realizes that Hyel's subconscious determination to protect his vision magic is too powerful for his spell to overcome. Accepting defeat, he tells Hyel to stop resisting. Behind his convincing performance, Hyel quietly smiles to himself after successfully confirming how the Black Tower's mind control magic truly functions. The spell directly manipulates the brain, influencing emotions and twisting thoughts, while a more powerful mage could completely destroy a person's mind using the same technique, making it an extremely dangerous forbidden magic. He also realizes that if someone fiercely protects certain memories, the spell becomes unstable under the pressure, explaining why Smith abandoned the attempt so quickly. At that moment, Hyul understands that his modified magic was never Smith's true objective. Smith presses a hand against his forehead while clenching his jaw, muttering that a loser like Hyul should not deserve such a powerful, unique magic. He admits that his original intention had been to cheaply dispose of Hyul in order to complete his assigned mission. Snapping his fingers confidently, Smith declares that once this mission is over, he will personally obtain that magic himself. Right afterward, Hyul slowly blinks and pretends to regain consciousness, looking at Smith with complete confusion as though he has no memory of what just happened. Without hesitation, Smith instantly returns to his usual appearance as a kind instructor, wearing a warm smile while asking whether Hyul feels all right because he appeared distracted for a brief moment during their conversation. Gently patting him on the shoulder, Smith remarks that he must simply be exhausted, assures him that he will not disturb him any further, wishes him good luck, and calmly disappears into the busy academy grounds as though nothing unusual had occurred. Hyul remains standing in silence with an unreadable expression as he stares intently at the teacher. Later, as lunchtime arrives and students excitedly head toward the cafeteria while joking among themselves that hunger can make even cheap coffee taste luxurious, Hyul quietly separates from the crowd. Instead of joining them, he walks alone until he reaches a wooden bench on the academy grounds, where he slowly sits down and examines the cube once more. The small cube reflects a faint glow beneath the sunlight, allowing Hyul to immediately recognize it as an illegal AI chip. He understands that giving him this means that they are trying to frame him as an illegal AI user. This chip is an IL Innovative Level Up chip, a device that has been completely prohibited by the authorities. The discovery leaves a bitter feeling in his heart because someone intends to frame him as a criminal. He can already imagine the accusations, the public labeling him as a fraud, while those responsible quietly celebrate from the shadows. Thinking carefully, Hyul realizes that although Smith clearly harbors hostility toward him, the instructor has no personal reason to act this way. The only explanation that makes sense is that someone powerful has hired the Black Tower to eliminate him. His thoughts naturally drift toward the brutal struggle for succession within influential families, where siblings constantly compete for power. He remembers one particularly arrogant sibling who openly threatened to kill him, but quickly dismisses the possibility because such a complicated scheme is far beyond that person's capabilities. That leaves his remaining 2 brothers and 2 sisters as the most likely suspects. Mentally reviewing each sibling one by one, Hyul concludes that his older sister Minji has no interest in the succession battle and would never arrange something this elaborate. His older brother In-hyuk is deeply involved in family affairs, yet lacks the courage to organize such a dangerous plan. After eliminating both of them, Hyul is left with 2 siblings who possess both the motive and the willingness to have him killed. As that realization settles in, his fingers tighten firmly around the illegal chip. For a brief moment, Hyul considers capturing Smith and forcing him to reveal the truth, but he quickly abandons the idea. The Black Tower is infamous for eliminating loose ends, meaning that even if Smith is directly involved, there is a strong chance he has no knowledge of the person who actually hired them. Interrogating him would likely destroy any remaining trail while placing Hyul himself in even greater danger. Choosing a more cautious approach, he decides to proceed carefully instead of acting recklessly. Before long, he makes his way toward the Blue Tower and begins climbing its staircase. Every step echoes heavily as he steadily ascends until he finally reaches the highest office within the tower. There, the master of the Blue Tower, Kim Kangan, waits for him. Kangan offers a calm greeting, yet his observant eyes carefully study Hyul with unusual intensity, while the cold atmosphere surrounding him feels noticeably heavier than before. Despite sensing the tension, Hyul continues forward, fully aware that the moment he has been preparing for has finally arrived. Kim Kangan places a hand over his face as though an enormous burden has suddenly landed on his shoulders. He reminds Hyul that he has already told him not to see himself as a burden, yet his wandering eyes suggest that something else is occupying his thoughts. Watching him closely, Hyul realizes this may be the only chance he has to move forward, and if he hesitates now, he may regret it later. Rumors about Kangjin's unusual research begin resurfacing in his mind, stories claiming that even the other tower masters approach the subject with caution. Gathering his courage, Hyul asks whether Kangjin is currently researching something. Kangjin openly admits that he is, explaining that he has been studying a mysterious magic stone that has consumed far more of his time than he originally expected. Hyul's gaze naturally shifts toward the elegant box resting on the desk, where a beautifully shimmering stone catches his attention. The moment he sees it, he immediately recognizes it as elemental monolith. Inside, he quietly celebrates the unbelievable opportunity before him, knowing that most people would never encounter such a treasure in their entire lives. Kangjin gestures for Hyul to take a seat on the sofa, and after both of them settle down, he decides to skip any unnecessary conversation. He explains that since they are both busy, they should immediately discuss the reason Hyul came, especially because it appeared urgent enough that it could not be postponed. The anticipation visible on Kangjin's face only makes Hyul feel more nervous, and he realizes that Kangjin is so eager he may overlook anything unless the conversation is carefully directed. Deciding to take a calculated risk, Hyul says that before discussing his actual request, there is something important Kangjin should know. Without hesitation, he reveals that the stone Kangjin has been researching is called elemental mana light. Kangjin instantly freezes before narrowing his eyes and demanding to know how Hyul could possibly know its name, let alone its existence when that information has never been disclosed outside the Blue Tower. Remaining calm, Hyul raises both hands to reassure him that he neither planted spies nor obtained the information through dishonest means. As Kangjin's suspicion gradually turns into curiosity, he asks once more how Hyul learned the truth. In response, Hyul calmly reaches into his bag and removes another elemental manalite stone. Unlike the one sitting on Kangjin's desk, this one shines with an even brighter glow. Casually explaining that he possesses one himself, Hyul leaves Kangjin so stunned that he rises from his seat in complete disbelief, unable to believe he is looking at a perfectly crafted elemental manalite. Still struggling to process what he is seeing, Kangjin asks Hyul whether he personally created the stone. Hyul calmly answers yes, a response that completely overturns everything Kangjin believes about magical craftsmanship. His thoughts immediately drift to James Pillar of the Red Tower, the legendary craftsman regarded as the greatest creator of magic stones alive. Even the finest artisans within the Blue Tower, including Kangjin himself, who are considered among the top 3 in the world, have never succeeded in producing such a gemstone. Yet standing before him is a student who should still be worrying about examinations rather than casually presenting what amounts to a miracle. Kangjin then briefly asks whether Hyul simply discovered the magic stone by chance. Hyul tells him no comment, but then decides to explain that although he found the stone by chance, he was lucky enough to be able to craft it into an elemental manalite. That answer only strengthens Kangjin's desire to recruit Hyul into the Blue Tower. Although he tries to conceal his excitement, the brightness in his eyes makes his enthusiasm obvious. Hyul can only laugh awkwardly, while Kangjin assures him that every mage has the right to protect personal secrets and promises not to question him any further. Grateful for that understanding, Hyul smiles in return. Kangjin carefully gathers several of his crafting tools and politely asks whether he may inspect the stone more closely. Without any hesitation, Hyul hands it over. Kangjin examines every detail with meticulous attention before confirming that it is the only known magic stone capable of containing all 4 elemental properties simultaneously. After respectfully returning it, he asks Hyul what he intends to do with such an extraordinary treasure. Hyul explains that he wishes to use it to craft an artifact. When Kangjin asks whether he plans to make clothing, an accessory, or a weapon, Hyul replies that the exact form does not matter as long as it significantly improves elemental magic performance. Kangjin warns him that a magic stone of such exceptional quality requires equally valuable materials, and the crafting costs alone would be incredibly expensive. However, seeing Hyul's expression remain completely unchanged, Kangjin quickly assumes that someone from Hyul's prestigious magic family could easily afford the expense. Hyul immediately interrupts him, explaining that he wants the entire crafting process to remain completely hidden from both his family and everyone else. Rather than finding the request suspicious, Kangjin respects his desire for secrecy even more, but he asks him how will they handle the payment then. Using magical star strokes, Kangjin writes glowing numbers into the air, revealing the estimated cost of 645 million. He then asks whether Hyul is capable of paying such an amount without relying on his family. Hyul calmly admits that he cannot, but instead proposes another arrangement. He offers to demonstrate the complete process of crafting elemental manalite directly in front of Kangen, allowing him to learn the method in exchange for creating the item. Hearing that proposal, Kangen becomes overwhelmed with excitement. To him, this is not merely a favorable bargain, but an opportunity far more valuable than any amount of money. Without hesitation, he agrees to the arrangement, and he even adds that he can ask something extra. Taking this opportunity, Hyul presents one final request by taking out the small chip that Instructor Smith previously handed to him. Kangen carefully examines it and quickly identifies it as a new generation IL low-cost upgrade chip. Curious about its origin, he asks Hyul where did he get it. Hyul tightens his fist before explaining that the chip was given to him by a Black Tower mage operating secretly within Obelisk Academy. He then asks Kangen for assistance in uncovering and dealing with those hidden infiltrators. Later that evening, a white vehicle waits beside the roadside as Hyul steps out. Before leaving, he politely tells the driver to return safely. The driver, Kangen's secretary Jongsua, smiles and replies that they will meet again soon before driving away. Watching the vehicle disappear into the distance, Hyul enters the academy dormitory. Once inside his room, he throws himself comfortably onto his bed and reflects on how fortunate he was to discover Kangen's research into elemental manalite. Thanks to that coincidence, he can proceed with crafting the artifact while keeping everything hidden from his father. His thoughts eventually drift toward Baek Sahyuk, and he imagines the furious reaction Sahyuk would have if he learned about these developments. Hyul also recalls that he originally intended to request only 3% of the Baek family's mining rights, but with his current advantage, he now believes he may be able to secure the entire share instead. As sleep gradually overtakes him, he quietly thinks that if everything continues according to plan, the future will unfold exactly as he desires. At the same time, back inside the Blue Tower, Kangen remains seated in deep thought. Although the information Hyul provided is undeniably compelling, accepting that members of the Black Tower have secretly infiltrated Obelisk Academy is difficult because the Academy is widely believed to possess extremely strict security. The only physical evidence currently available is the IL chip resting before him, yet he cannot ignore the growing suspicion in his mind. Carefully weighing the potential risks, Kangen eventually allows a calculating smile to appear across his face. He quietly remarks that under normal circumstances, the Blue Tower would never launch an investigation based solely on the testimony of a single student. But there are times when taking a calculated risk becomes the very thing that shapes history. Hyul arrives at the family gathering while staying in touch with Kangen, who tells him to stick to the plan because the Blue Tower doesn't miss when the information is solid and accurate. Hyul trusts him, heads upstairs, and gets welcomed by the family butler before greeting all of his siblings. Minji is genuinely happy to see him and jokes that he's gotten so tall he'll pass Inhyuk soon. Inhyuk welcomes him too, although in his usual blunt way, which immediately earns him a scolding from Minji. At the other end of the table, Jihan casually comments that Hyul finally looks like a grown man, while Seiya greets him with a fake smile. Hyul already suspects those two are hiding something, so he pays close attention to them. Once everyone sits down, Jihan asks why he called them together. Hyul claims he just wanted to see everyone after such a long time, but Seiya instantly loses her patience and demands he stop pretending. She wants to know if he's joining the succession race. Hyul asks whether she'd even believe him if he denied it. She says no, so he points out there was no reason to ask in the first place, which only annoys her even more. Jihan steps in and changes tactics. Instead of arguing, he asks Hyul to hand over his transformation magic to the family as proof that he has no interest in becoming the family's successor. Hyul realizes exactly what that means. Giving it away would basically be surrender. So he puts on an emotional act, saying it's the only thing keeping someone as untalented as him alive and has nothing to do with succession. Minji immediately falls for it and defends him, saying nobody should ask him to give up his only hope. Jihan, Seiya, and even Inhyuk have no good response, so the conversation dies there and everyone goes back to eating. While they chat, Hyul keeps checking the time. Right on schedule, an emergency alert pops up on everyone's phone. The news reveals that Lang Smith, the second son of the Smith family and a staff member at Obelisk Academy, has been exposed as a Black Tower mage and arrested by Jongsua under Kangen's Blue Tower. Everyone reacts differently, but Hyul catches the brief look on Jihan's face before he hides it again. That tiny reaction is all Hyul needed. Later, Hyul calls Kangen, and another report confirms Lang Smith was caught sabotaging supplies for the Academy's survival test. Kang wonders, how did our boy know that Lang Smith would mess with the training supplies? Hyul explains that he just made a logical deduction based on the intel he had. Since Smith operated inside the academy, it was likely that he would act within the campus ground, and considering the timing of his mind control on him, the survival test was the obvious target. And if he wanted to pull something during the survival test, he had to mess with the training materials. The supplies are only checked the afternoon before the exam, so Smith had a very small window to make his move. Hyul predicted that and asked the Blue Tower to watch the supply room, letting Jongsua catch him in the act. Bringing all his siblings together also had a second purpose. He wanted to see who reacted when the news broke, and Jihan exposed himself just enough to confirm Hyul's suspicions. It's still not enough to accuse him, but the trap worked, and the Blue Tower earned a huge boost to its reputation. He executed the plan perfectly, gathering information without compromising himself. Kangjin laughs that he was supposed to help Hyul but ended up being the one receiving help instead. He thanks him and promises to repay the favor. Hyul accepts, ends the call, and walks away feeling like everything went perfectly. Then out of nowhere, a huge explosion erupts behind him. The ground shakes, and a cold voice tells him to die. The explosion turns out to be Sayuk launching a surprise attack, and Hyul barely reacts in time by throwing up a water shield reinforced with resonance. Even then, the flames are way too strong. The barrier starts breaking apart, so he dodges at the last second and still gets blasted into a pillar. Sayuk mocks him, saying this is the difference between them, but Hyul quickly notices something is seriously wrong. Sayuk's eyes are bloodshot, his skin is bright red, and he's acting completely unhinged. That's when Hyul realizes he's using the Berserker drug, a stimulant that overloads the mana circle and basically turns someone into a walking time bomb as the user fights until they die. Hyul calls him insane, but Sayuk charges anyway, insisting he's perfectly fine, which is probably the least convincing thing he could have said. Before Hyul can recover, Sayuk pins him down and fires another point-blank fire strike. The blast leaves Hyul covered in burns, but he's still alive, which only makes Sayuk snap even harder. One moment he's screaming in rage, the next he's suddenly calm. Watching all this, Hyul becomes even more certain it's the Berserker drug. But something still doesn't add up. Even with the drug, Sayuk shouldn't be this powerful. That means there's something else boosting him. While Sayuk rushes in again, Hyul counters with Wind Sphere, sending a flock of aura swallows at him as a distraction before following up with another spell, Arrow Boom. The spell lands cleanly, and for a second it looks like the attack worked. Then Sayuk immediately recovers and switches to Flame Shotgun, firing powerful blasts from his fingertip. Hyul realizes the spell is deadly up close, but loses effectiveness with distance, so he keeps moving and dodging while taking a few burns along the way. In the middle of the fight, Hyul suddenly asks if Sayuk hates him so much that he even relied on an illegal IL chip. Sayuk denies knowing anything about it and keeps attacking, but Hyul already knew about this since he already expected that this moron won't even remember. Then he spots a glowing purple chip on the back of his neck. That explains everything. The chip enhances the body and strengthens magic itself, increasing both its power and range. Hyul explains that his own research into mana transformation and circle acceleration lets him recognize those changes immediately. And whether it's lucky or unlucky, our boy is actually getting hints from both the illegal chip and Berserker to progress to his next stage of magic. Realizing this combination might finally answer questions he's been chasing for a long time, Hyul ignores Sahyuk's furious shouting, because thanks to him, he will climb even higher. But then he calmly says, there's no need to thank him because everything will be settled soon enough, and activates Resonance once again. Hyul realizes Resonance comes with a huge downside. Combining different magic circles keeps increasing the penalty, and once he activates his second circle, he only has 3 minutes before his body completely gives out for the next 12 hours. Knowing the risk, he decides 3 minutes is all he needs. He activates Earth Needle, sending massive spikes tearing through the ground, and one of them pierces Sayuk's leg. Shocked, Sayuk demands to know how Hyul is using third circle magic, but Hyul just shrugs it off. Furious, Sayuk fires a huge beam of fire, but this time Hyul's water shield isn't the same. Instead of simply blocking the attack, It spins into a vortex that completely absorbs the flames. This completely shocks Sayuk, but Hyul points out that Sayuk would have noticed the difference if he actually understood magic instead of relying on brute force. Unable to accept it, Sayuk convinces himself Hyul must be using illegal doping too and charges again. Hyul calmly says the fight is over. Suddenly, the battlefield changes into a world of endless water and darkness. Sayuk has no idea what's happening and starts yelling for Hyul to come out, but Hyul activates Earthbind and shadowy chains lock Sayuk in place. Hyul tells him that if he had any hesitation in killing him, then he would have spared his life, but now it's too late. Even then, Sayuk blames Hyul for ruining his life. Hyul tells him he'd still be blaming everyone else no matter what happened. Then, instead of finishing him immediately, Hyul asks if he knows the real danger of illegal AI chip. He reaches behind Sahyuk's neck and pours mana directly into the IL chip. The chip's frequency goes out of control, sending Sahyuk into unbearable pain. Hyul explains that the chip and the berserker drug have already pushed his body past its limit, so even a small overload is enough to break everything. After tormenting him a little longer, Hyul sarcastically thanks him because this incident is now so serious that the Baek family will lose a huge share of the magic stone mining rights to him. Finally, he floods the chip with one last surge of mana. The overloaded chip ruptures, black liquid pours out, and Sayuk dies on the spot. Afterward, Hyul picks up a phone and calls his father. He says he already knows the truth that his father has been watching everything because despite all the chaos, neither the police nor the students showed up, meaning someone intentionally let everything play out. His father tries to deny it, but Hyul points out that plenty of people could stop the police, but only his father would quietly watch the fight until the very end without interfering. If it was anyone else, supposedly his sighter or brother, they would have surely intervened or even stabbed him in the back. Thanks to his father's previous protection orders, his older siblings can't keep our boy under surveillance or intervene with him directly. Hearing that, his father admits he figured it out. Right then, someone hiding nearby steps out. A man dressed completely in black with glowing red eyes bows before Hyul, and his father says that Seo-hyun, the man in black, had been sent to follow him all along. After everything is over, Hyul hands Sahyuk over to the shadow guards and moves somewhere with a better signal to call his father. His father immediately asks why he never asked for help when it was obvious he knew that he was watching him. Hyul quickly lies, saying he just wanted to show off his third circle magic. His father is impressed, never expecting him to reach that level so soon, while Hyul quietly admits to himself that it wasn't real third circle magic at all. It was only resonance with second circle magic. He also knows revealing the truth would only make his siblings target him even more. Nearby, Seok-hyun finishes setting up soundproofing and illusion magic. Hyul thanks his father, who promises to send a car to bring him home, then ends the call feeling genuinely pleased with how much Hyul has changed over the past year. Hyul greets Seok-hyun, who removes his mask, treats the wound on Hyul's cheek with healing magic, and says the family doctor will handle the rest later. After thanking him, Hyul leaves the cleanup in Seok-hyun's hands, and Seok-hyun confidently promises that nothing about the incident will leak. Elsewhere, Jihan returns home furious over how badly everything failed. Waiting for him is the Black Tower agent involved in the plan. The man casually apologizes, saying the payment will be refunded, the aftermath will be cleaned up, and no information will leak because Jihan is a VIP client. He also reveals that Lang Smith won't survive until morning. Jihan isn't interested in Smith anymore. He wants to know what happened with Sahyuk. The agent tells him Sahyuk is already brain dead from the side effects. When Jihan asks about Hyul, the man says he was injured but doesn't know the details. As Jihan pieces everything together, he realizes Hyul somehow defeated Sahyuk despite using the berserker drug and the illegal chip. The agent adds one important detail. Seok-hyun had covered the area with barriers and soundproofing so they couldn't fully observe the fight. That immediately alarms Jihan because Seok-hyun answers directly to their father. Realizing the situation is much bigger than he thought, Jihan decides it's too dangerous to make another move against Hyul for now. He then asks about the IL chip given to Shin Hyul by Smith previously, and the agent explains it was built to erase itself automatically, leaving no evidence behind. With nothing else to discuss, the man simply jumps out the window and disappears. Left alone, Jihan decides to destroy every possible trace before Seok-hyun can investigate. A few days later, Hyul learns that Lang Smith died during transport after collapsing, which is a much less dramatic ending than he expected. He also knows Seok-hyun has already taken care of the Sahyuk incident. Then his father sends him a message saying negotiations with the Bayek family were successful. In exchange for keeping the incident quiet, they secured 43% of the magic stone mining rights, giving the family much stronger financial support for its overseas projects. His father congratulates him and tells him to ask if he wants any reward. Satisfied with how everything turned out, Hyul checks another notification and sees that the Academy Olympiad begins in 53 days. It's the world's biggest tournament for the strongest Academy mages, and after reading the details, he smiles, already looking forward to the competition. Hyul is waiting for the Academy Olympiad when a blue light suddenly surrounds him. He immediately realizes the 12-hour resonance penalty is finally over. Feeling his strength return, he decides it's time to unlock the third magic circle. The moment he opens Idred's book, a huge surge of power erupts from it, and before he can react, the book pulls him inside. When he opens his eyes, he finds himself in a strange white space where a girl with white hair and amber eyes introduces herself as Beta, the evaluator for the second test. Hyul instantly remembers how brutal the first test was, so he already expects this one to be just as bad. Beta explains that this trial will test his ability to manipulate magic circles. If he passes, pages 32 through 81 of the book will unlock, revealing the secrets of the third magic circle. Hearing he'll unlock almost 50 new pages leaves Hyul both excited and nervous because the reward is far greater than last time, meaning third circle magic will be on a completely different level. Beta starts the test and disappears. Then his master's voice explains the rules. 100 magic circles will appear one after another, and Hyul has to activate each one. As soon as his own magic circle connects with them, they'll activate automatically. Sounds simple until the first circle suddenly changes shape. His master then reveals the real catch. Every circle has to be activated within 3 seconds, and if Hyul fails even once, everything resets. Just as Hyul thinks he can solve it by memorizing the patterns, he's told the order changes every attempt, so that idea dies instantly. With no shortcuts left, he spends hours trying over and over. By the time he's thrown back to reality, 8 hours have passed and he's only managed to activate 10 circles. It's terrible progress, but at least he's starting to understand how the test works. Looking for any kind of hint, Hyul finds a note in the book saying Idred wrote more than one book and that reading his other works would help overcome future obstacles. That immediately gives him hope until he realizes he has no idea what those books are called or where to find them. Later, while clearing his head, Hyul runs into Adela again at a convenience store, and obviously she is buying banana milk again. They head to a nearby park, joke about how exhausted they both look, and Adela excitedly hands him a thesis called The Feasibility of Spatial Teleportation Magic. He jokes that it looks like it was thrown together at 2 in the morning, but agrees to read it anyway. By the time Adela finishes 3 banana milks, Hyul has finished reading and genuinely praises the paper. They both notice at the same time that the thesis has no conclusion, but Hyul quickly realizes something much more important. The writing is clearly based on Ray Belbaitano's theories. The structure is different, but the style is unmistakable. He immediately asks who wrote it, and Adela tells him the author is Go Sang-jun. That night, Hyul searches for everything he can find about the name, but comes up almost empty. Go Sang-jun has no known affiliation, no public age or gender, only this single thesis, and disappeared after it was heavily criticized. While wondering if this is really all a normal student like him could accomplish, Hyul stares at the thesis until he gets an idea. He calls the Blue Tower Master with a smile, already thinking that whatever happens next, he's long stopped being a normal student because now he has powerful connections. The phone inside the Blue Magic Tower keeps ringing without pause, and Kim Kangan, who has been drowning in research for hours and looks like someone held hostage by Diddy, finally picks up. The moment Hyul says he has a mutually beneficial deal, Kangan is fully awake. Hyul gets straight to the point and asks him to help find someone. Back at Obelisk Academy, Hyul easily overwhelms Jisun Chan during magic training. Jisun barely blocks the attack and immediately complains that Hyul is cheating. Hyul doesn't see the problem, saying he is using only a first circle spell, so Jisun demands a fight without magic instead. Hyul agrees without hesitation. Jisun rushes in, expecting an easy win, but Hyul instantly grabs him and throws him to the ground with a clean shoulder toss that leaves everyone watching completely stunned. Even without magic, Hyul is more than capable of handling himself. Jisun gets back up, bruised and embarrassed, complaining that Hyul fights dirty. Hyul just tells him to train harder. Then Jisun suddenly asks if Hyul plans to compete in the Academy Olympiad and if his goal is to win it. Hyul freezes for a moment, wondering how did he know about that, but Jisun says he already figured it out after the monocrystal barrier test. Most students can only take around 27 hits, while Hyul endured 74. That alone made his goal obvious. Jisun also warns him that this year's favorite is already a 5-circle mage, and with only his 2nd circle magic, it's definitely impossible to win against him. Hyul knows deep down that even with resonance letting him fight at the level of a 3rd circle magic, it won't be enough. If he wants a real chance, he has to reach the 4th circle, and for that, Hyul knows that he needs to find Go Sang-jun. After a week, Hyul follows the address Kangen gave him, and is surprised to arrive at a bookstore he used to visit years ago while desperately searching for ways to overcome his inability to use AI magic. Looking back, he even wonders if the strange codex he once found came from this very place. Inside, the owner recognizes him immediately and comments on how much healthier he looks now that he can use magic. Hyul thanks him, saying the books he bought there helped change his life. Then he reveals the real reason he came. He wants to meet Go Sang-jun, who turns out to be the owner's son. The owner is surprised Hyul knows that name. Hyul explains that reading Jun's thesis led him to investigate until he finally tracked him down. After thinking it over, the owner agrees to let him meet Jun, but warns that even if they meet, Hyul probably won't get the answers he's looking for. This surprises Hyul, wondering what does that mean. He leads Hyul to a closed room and tells him to go inside. Hyul opens the door, expecting an ordinary meeting, only to be completely stunned by what he sees. Go Sang-jun is lying unconscious on life support. When Hyul asks what happened, the owner reveals that Sang-jun broke the biggest taboo for mages by circulating mana directly into his brain. Hyul is completely shaken because that's exactly what he did before. Curious why anyone would take that risk, he learns Sang-jun was trying to finish a thesis and refused to give up, even after it fell apart. The owner still regrets not stopping him. Looking at Sang-jun, Hyul can't help wondering how close he got to reaching a level of magic that touched forbidden territory. The owner apologizes for not being able to answer more of his questions, saying Sang-jun would have loved talking to someone like Hyul, and Hyul apologizes for bringing up such painful memories. The owner brushes it off and admits Hyul's obsession with magical books reminds him a lot of his son, which strangely makes him happy. Taking the chance, Hyul asks if he can read Sang-jun's research books. The owner agrees, but asks for 2 things in return. First, if Hyul ever writes about spatial magic, he wants Sang-jun's name mentioned at least once. Second, he must never circulate mana into his brain. Hyul quickly promises both. The owner then brings him to Sang-jun's collection, and while looking around, one book suddenly falls off the shelf right in front of him. It instantly reminds him of the Idrid book. When he asks about it, the owner says Sang-jun treated it like his most valuable possession and suggests it might contain the answers Hyul is looking for. Hyul opens it, complains about the impossible handwriting for about 2 seconds, then realizes it's actually his master's handwriting. He asks to borrow it, gets permission, and even asks if there are any more books like it. The owner says no. Hyul also asks about an expensive-looking red book. Of course, it's the Book of Idred that he has at home, which he thought he got from the store. But the owner tells him that has never seen one. That only makes Hyul wonder even more how Sang-jun ever got the Idrid book. After thanking him, he heads home and keeps thinking about how that mysterious book somehow ended up in his own bag. Back in his room, he places Sang-jun's book beside the Idrid book and compares them. He had searched everywhere in Sang-jun's study but only found one book similar to the Book of Idrid, which is disappointing, but still better than nothing. Then both books suddenly start glowing at the same time. Before he can react, he's pulled inside again. A familiar voice says this book was left for the rightful heir of the Idrid book and introduces it as the Book of Mimir, telling him to enjoy its blessings of knowledge. Hyul immediately recognizes the voice as his master's. The light completely swallows him, and when it disappears, only the 2 books are left on the bed. He wakes up in a simple but elegant room, confused about where he is. Before he can figure it out, someone pokes his neck from behind. He turns around and finds a beautiful girl smiling at him as she happily welcomes him to the Book of Mimir. She introduces herself as Mimir, the administrator of this place, which is called as Mimir's Well, and explains that this library was created by Ray Bel Baitano for anyone who inherits the Baitano legacy. Our boy looks around and points out that the place is way too small to be called a library. Mimir tells him that's because the library grows along with its successor. Since he hasn't even cleared the second trial yet, this is all he gets for now. Just then, Mimir asks if they can drop the formal speech because it's really annoying her. Our boy agrees, and the conversation gets a lot more relaxed. Mimir then reveals he's actually ahead of most successors because he found Mimir's well after reaching only the second circle, and finding this place means that he can keep progressing all the way to the fifth circle without running into major problems. This complete surprises our boy, and naturally, Hyul wants to know how, but instead of explaining, Mimir tosses him a massive book and tells him to read. Inside is the complete theory of resonance. She explains that Idrade's codex only contained the essentials because there wasn't enough space, and dumping everything into the trial would have overwhelmed future successors. Mimir's well exists to store all the knowledge that couldn't fit. Hyul realizes his master basically split the information between the two books. Idred's codex is the study guide, while Mimir's well is the full textbook. Looking around, he figures every book here is packed with knowledge, and that the library will keep expanding as he grows stronger. Mimir confirms it, and Hyul immediately gets to work. He spends his time studying non-stop, pushing himself until he can synchronize 79 magic circles. Standing before the second trial, he remembers when synchronizing just 10 circles used to take him 8 hours. Ever since finding Mimir's well, his progress has exploded. Now he's confident he'll finish all 100 circles by tonight or tomorrow at the latest, and he's glad he found this place before the upcoming Olympiad. Back in the real world, Hyul gets called to his family's mansion and assumes it's about his reward for the Bayek Sahyuk incident. He's a little annoyed since he'd rather be studying, but he heads in anyway. His father tells him that even if his contribution wasn't as big as last time, it still made up more than half the total effort. Because of this and his previous achievements, Hyul is awarded 26% of the family's mana stone mining rights. His father says he's earned a reward and asks what he wants. Hyul immediately asks for the ancient relic hidden in the deepest part of the family vault. His father is surprised and questions why he'd want some old relic when all those legends are probably nonsense. Hyul says he doesn't believe every myth, but he does think there's usually some truth buried inside them. His father still isn't convinced, but he agrees to honor the request as long as Hyul only takes one item from the vault. Hyul happily accepts, and when his father asked what ancient relic he wants, with a very happy and excited tone, he tells him that he wants Raybel Bateno's robe. At the Mage Divine family's treasure vault, our boy finally gets Raybel Bateno's robe. His father warns him not to regret picking an old relic because he still thinks the stories about ancient artifacts are nonsense. He tells him to focus on training instead and reminds him he can always return it if he changes his mind. On the way home, he thinks about how most of his family's ancient relics have actually been real. If this robe really belonged to his master, then trading away 30% of the family's mana stone mining rights was totally worth it. Even so, part of him wonders if he just got ripped off. The second he takes the robe out, he realizes it's made entirely from mana fiber. That's an incredibly rare material with fewer than 30 craftsmen in the world capable of making it. Most magic items only use a little, but this robe is made completely from it. He wonders how could such advanced technology exist in that era, because even now in the modern era, making this much mana fiber is almost impossible. Our boy is truly happy with his reward that he almost wets himself. Back in his room, he realizes the craftsmanship is far beyond anything modern mages can create. Then he notices a messy signature and immediately recognizes his master's handwriting. After looking closer, he finds something even stranger. The robe's inner and outer layers are reversed. Normally, the inside boosts mana efficiency and the outside blocks mana attacks, but this one does the exact opposite, which makes it pretty useless. Then he thought that the robe was probably designed to be worn inside out, and once it's flipped over, everything works exactly as it should. But as he tries to reverse it, the structure of the outer and inner side does not change, but it remains the same. So our boy finally realizes that it was intentionally designed this way, which makes him wonder why and for what purpose. He now realizes that this must be the reason why his father left it to rot in the family vault, because this robe is literally useless. But just then, he's suddenly sent back to the library. Mimir is surprised he returned so quickly, but the moment she sees the robe, she's completely shocked. She asks if it really belonged to Raybel Bateno and tells him he got unbelievably lucky. When he mentions the robe seems strange, she takes a look and asks if he's still only at the second circle. After he confirms it, she explains that's why he can't understand the robe yet. She tries to explain how it works, but suddenly stops because she's not allowed to reveal its secrets, and she even gives the robe back to him saying she can't help him. But feeling bad for him, she attempts to mention a spell from Baitano-style magic, but she can't even say the name of the spell because her words gets blocked. After another try, she's at least able to tell him that Baitano's style magic has a special spell, a spell called as true magic. He asks if that means the magic he uses now isn't the real thing, and she admits that's correct. But she can't explain anything else until he gets stronger and reach a certain level. He realizes some kind of restriction is stopping her from talking, and she confirms the robe was created to support true magic, which is exactly why she can't reveal anything more. Once he pieces it all together, Mimir is impressed by how quickly he understands. He then asks what level he needs to reach before she'll explain everything. She tells him he has to reach the 5th circle and enter the page of the 5th trial. Only then can she reveal the truth, because real Baitano-style magic doesn't truly begin until the 5th circle. After some time, our boy pushes through the final stretch of his training, counts all the way to 100, and the moment he finishes, a burst of light confirms he cleared the 2nd trial. Before he can celebrate for long, his master congratulates him and immediately moves on to the next lesson. It's time to weave the 3rd infinity circle. Unlike the previous ones, this stage is built around something called interference, which catches him completely off guard. While recovering, he realizes he never would have cleared the 2nd trial without Ray Bel Baitano's robe and everything Mimir taught him. That reminds him of what happened the night before. Mimir explained that the robe's true power stays locked until he reaches the 5th circle and clears its special trials. Thinking it's useless for now, he decides to store it away, but Mimir instantly stops him. She explains the robe isn't useless at all. It seals mana inside the body, keeping it from leaking out, which would allow him to reach a state of mana saturation. And when mana is saturated, it lets the infinity circles spin faster, sending more mana to the brain and greatly speeding up both mental and physical recovery. His immediate conclusion is that if he wears the robe, he can stop sleeping. Mimir can't believe that's the only thing he took from her explanation, but she admits he's right. Wearing it for about 5 hours a day is enough to stay in top condition. She adds that this is only a bonus effect, since the robe's real ability is still hidden. Hearing that just makes him even more determined to reach the 5th circle. Before leaving, Mimir warns him that the robe only works for him. Anyone else who wears it would basically be poisoned. He promises not to let anyone else use it. 2 days later, he's sitting on his bed with the robe over him, trying over and over to understand interference. He knows he's close, but one final piece is still missing. The 3rd circle is all about interfering with another person's mana by synchronizing with it perfectly. He starts thinking that's the true meaning behind the Ring of Interference, and he also realizes the 2nd trial gave him exactly the control needed to reach this point. To weave the 3rd ring, he has to make the Ring of Resonance resonate with itself while synchronizing with all the mana around him. Once he begins meditating, his body fills with mana, and it feels like he's building a new home inside himself. Mana spirits gather around him, settle into his core, and even invite him to play with them. He realizes he's already halfway there and only needs to keep the resonance stable. As the spirits dance together, the pressure keeps rising. One tiny mistake would make the mana reject his body, so he carefully lowers the amplification rate by just 0.01% at a time while quietly absorbing the mana, forming the new circle without alerting the spirits. When it's finally over, he snaps back to reality, gasping for air. Then he stands up and shows the result. First comes the circle of deliberation, then the circle of resonance, and finally, the newly completed 3rd infinity circle of interference. Our boy was finally able to complete the 3rd infinity circle, the circle of interference, and the burst of mana makes it clear he's reached a whole new level. Even then, he isn't satisfied. His next goal is reaching the 5th circle as fast as possible. Later, the battle survival exam begins in the mountains of Gangwon province. The rules are simple. Survive for 32 hours inside a battlefield that keeps shrinking while your artifact tracks your progress. Between monsters and other students, it's basically a magical battle royale, and Yahello is one of the biggest targets. It doesn't take long for someone to jump him from behind with a fireball. Yahello dodges it without any trouble, and when the guy hides behind a magic barrier, Yahello finally puts interference to the test. The barrier starts cracking immediately, and a basic Earth sphere finishes the job. He calls the moron an idiot for attacking Big Daddy, while his wrist artifact confirms Kang Gihak has been eliminated, earning him 10 points. As he walks away, he even points out the moron's biggest mistake. Shouting his attack names during an ambush isn't exactly a genius move. He also realizes interference is even stronger than expected since it weakened a 2-circle barrier enough for a 1-circle spell to destroy it. As he heads deeper into the forest, he starts thinking interference might even work on 3-circle magic soon. Then another explosion attracts a pack of Bloodclaw wolves. Instead of seeing trouble, he sees free points and gets ready to farm them. While that's happening, the instructors watch the exam and go over the top performers, including Adela Sterat, Ji Sun-chin, Kim Kang-soo, and Ma Jae-hak. They expect those students to stay in the top 10, but the conversation quickly shifts to Hyul. Even instructor Go Chung-soo admits nobody can question his talent anymore. The rankings reveal Hyul sitting comfortably in first place with 5,341 points. The staff is stunned after realizing how he built such a huge lead. Instead of wiping out every Bloodclaw wolf, he deliberately left one alive so its howls would attract more wolves from up to 5 kilometers away. He basically turned the exam into his own personal point farm, and the instructors are already hoping he'll win the Olympiad. After collecting another 60 points, the ground suddenly starts shaking. At first he thinks it's an earthquake, but then he realizes the ground itself is moving. A gigantic emerald turtle rises from beneath him. It's a rare monster with a body as big as an elephant and a massive cluster of glowing blue crystals on its back. Hyul can't believe a legendary beast like this has appeared in the middle of a student exam. Back in the observation room, everyone agrees Hyul is in serious trouble. The emerald turtle is a Class 4, Grade C monster with absurd defense, making it a nightmare for every magician's, and it's definitely impossible to defeat it all alone. Every step it takes shakes the ground, but Hyul isn't worried about that. He's thinking about the 1,000 points waiting for whoever beats it. He jumps into the air and uses magic barriers as platforms to stay out of the turtle's reach. The instructors immediately point out that those barriers won't hold. Even a 6-circle mage would struggle against an emerald turtle, so a student shouldn't stand a chance. Hyul opens with Vulcan Flame just to test its defense. The flames disappear and the monster doesn't even have a scratch. That's when he realizes this fight is going to be a lot tougher than he expected, and he thinks that even a 5th circle mage would have trouble taking it down alone. On top of that, the turtle is much faster than it looks because mana is flowing through its body, so he strengthens his legs with magic to keep up. The turtle smashes through a massive tree with a single charge, and Hyul barely gets out of the way. One direct hit would destroy his body and instantly kill him, and he knows that running isn't an option anymore if he wants to win. So, he creates another barrier to block its attack, but it was too powerful and he had no choice but to activate resonance in order to hold it back as he watches the monster carefully. He knows that the double charge of the monster puts huge stress on its joints, leaving it unable to move for a brief moment afterward. It was something he remembered from a picture book as a kid, and now that tiny detail might save his life. The instant the turtle stops moving, he uses wind magic to stay airborne, dives in with a massive ice spear, and activates interference. The attack pierces the emerald turtle's defense, disrupts the mana flowing through its body, and brings the giant monster crashing to the ground. This completely shocks all the teachers inside the observatory room because what Hyul achieved was next to impossible. At the same time, Hyul was barely able to catch his breath when realizes he actually managed to pull it off. His wrist artifact immediately awards him 1,000 points, giving him exactly the boost he wanted. The scene then shifts to the mansion of the magic god, where the family head and Seok Hyun watch a recording of the fight. They point out that while emerald turtles are weak to ice magic, defeating one with only 3 circles magic is almost impossible. The family head praises Hyul's judgment, saying he never raised someone weak. However, Seok-hyun is more concerned that Hyul is showing off his power too much when Jihan and Sia are watching his every move. But the family head says all of this is part of Hyul's plan. Back when his magic was sealed, he was ignored and pushed out of the family's competitions. As a result, his status within the family is currently in a miserable state. That's why now he wants to stand out as much as possible during the 2 months before the Olympiad. He even asked the family head to protect him from Jihan and Sia while he builds his reputation. His goal is to become so outstanding that the family has no choice but to raise his status, and by the time those 2 months are over, he believes Jihan and Sia won't be able to touch him anymore. Back in the forest, Hyul is already sitting beside a campfire, casually seasoning a turtle steak like he didn't just defeat a legendary monster. Night falls on the first day of the survival exam, and the academy starts the mandatory ceasefire from 11 p.m. to 1 a.m. During those 2 hours, nobody is allowed to fight. Hyul thinks the rule is way too soft compared to the brutal training students in other countries go through, but he doesn't complain. Instead, he enjoys the break, especially since the master's robe is already recovering his body and mind while everyone else is probably struggling to sleep. After finishing his meal, he hears something in the bushes. It turns out to be Sunchan and Adela, both looking exhausted. Hyul is confused to see them together, but Sunchan explains they weren't teammates. They'd been fighting until the ceasefire started, and Adela completely beat him. Then they smelled Hyul's food and followed it to his camp. Adela immediately asks for some food. Hyul reminds them it's his dinner, but after a little guilt trip, he gives them the leftovers anyway. While eating, Adela guesses it's honey bear meat, but Hyul tells her no. Adela knows that the only edible monsters in the training area are honey bears and emerald turtles. Since it isn't honey bear, that leaves only one answer. Hyul agrees, and with a dumb smile, he casually reveals that he killed an emerald turtle earlier that day. The two of them freeze. Sunchan can't believe a student defeated a Class 4 monster, and Adela points out that anyone below the 5th circle beating an emerald turtle sounds impossible. Before they can question him any further, Hyul uses his magic, and a massive burst of magic lights up the night. The power is so overwhelming that they can't even tell if they're looking at 3 circles, 6 circles, or some kind of transformation magic. Hyul stays quiet and doesn't say anything, knowing that his master's magic only makes his own 3-circle magic look much stronger. When they ask how he killed the turtle, he casually says he pierced straight through its shell. Sunchan refuses to believe it, so Hyul reminds them the Academy's flying drones recorded everything, and they can watch the footage later. Once things calm down, the three agree to settle everything fairly when the fighting resumes. Hyul wishes them luck, and while Sunchan tells him that there is no way he can defeat him. However, Adela hints at something, saying she also has something to show him. The next day, only 2 hours remain before the exam ends. The safe zone has shrunk enough that the last 4 students are being forced together for the final showdown. Hyul walks through the forest with his hands in his pockets like he's out for a stroll when a wind spear suddenly flies at him. He dodges it with ease, while the moron who attacked him asks if they've finally reached the supernova phase. The fight instantly explodes into close combat. Hyul realizes the wind cutter was just a distraction before his opponent rushed in with martial arts, and a roundhouse kick barely misses his head. The attacks are much faster than he expected, forcing him to get serious as he avoids every strike. The moron turns out to be Ji-Sun Wook, who confidently challenges Shin Hyul, saying he's a close-range magic specialist and that Hyul was unlucky to run into him. Hyul just smiles and says he feels pretty lucky instead. Hyul remembers that in the past, during one of the school's exam, Ji-San Wook easily defeats his opponent with a single strike. The spectators cheer for San Wook, calling body enhancement magic one of the strongest combat styles. Hyul knows that among the second years, this moron is one of the top 2 in martial arts. He is an expert in body enhancement magic and definitely a serious opponent. So Hyul knows that using interference carelessly against someone like him would be a bad idea, so he decides to fight seriously from the start. Back in the observation room, the instructors realize both of them are settling this with close-range combat enhanced by magic. Most of them think San Wook has the edge because of his experience, besides he has even managed to win the National Junior Enhancement Magic competition. However, one of the teachers believes that nobody has seen Shin Hyul's true limits yet. During the fight, Hyul activates his demon eye and follows the flow of mana through San Wook's body. He catches a fake punch that turns into a kick before it happens, reads the attack perfectly, and prepares for it. Even when the kick lands, he calmly uses a barrier to push San Wook back. San Wook can't believe someone is using barriers like this and starts realizing the rumors about Hyul being a once-in-a-generation genius might actually be true. San Wook refuses to back down and charges again, but Hyul is already predicting every move. The moment he spots an opening, he lands a clean punch, but Ji-San Wook easily blocks it even after our boy has used enhancement magic on his fist. The instructors are stunned when Ji-San Wook blocks the attack with his bare hand so easily. Hyul steps back, and while fighting again, he analyzes San Wook's style, thinking his instincts are good but his techniques are still rough. He notes that earlier, if he had mixed a flame spell into what looked like a physical attack, it would have caused far more damage, even if he used defensive magic. As the fight goes on, San-wook struggles to keep up with Hyul's speed. Hyul even points out that he's leaving his armpit completely exposed. San-wook expects another punch, but Hyul shifts the mana from his fist to his legs at the last second and catches him with a powerful kick instead. San-wook doesn't even realize when the mana changed. Several of his ribs are likely broken, but he keeps fighting through sheer willpower. Hyul stays completely calm, warning the moron that relying only on physical strength will eventually destroy his body. He casually asks if San-wook is starting to overheat while effortlessly avoiding every desperate attack. The fight ends with one final blow that sends San-wook crashing to the ground. He only stays conscious because he gathered all his mana into his jaw at the last second to soften the impact. Before collapsing, he admits Hyul really is as strong as everyone says. Hyul fixes his clothes, gives San-wook credit for his fighting skills and defense, admitting that he really was not an easy opponent. With that, he receives 100 points on his wrist artifact. He notices only 3 students are left in the exam, but before he can react, that number drops to 2. Just then, our mysterious blonde girl steps out of the moonlight, greets him with a calm good evening, and remarks on what a beautiful night it is.